opportunity for the council and the public to learn and to have this general discussion, but not to take any formal action, with the exception of giving direction to staff. And then maybe we'll come back to items at a future point. But that's the purpose of these work session meetings. And so before we move on to our first item, which is our COVID-19 update, I'll just mention a couple things. One is this is census season, and pretty soon our census counters are going to be out knocking on doors for people who have not responded. And so we encourage everyone who has not responded to go online, and if you just Google census response, it'll take, or something generic like that, it'll take you to a website, and you can put in your response to the United States Census. Also, I'll point out that our city administrator, Chris Kukulski, is not with us tonight, and in his place, our assistant city administrator, Kevin Iflin, will be playing Chris's role. Chris is off, I think, probably having fun with his family. His daughter got married at the end of last week, and so he has a lot of company in town and off taking some well-deserved time off. So with that, Kevin Iflin, is there anything that you have for us before we jump into our first item, the COVID update featuring our County Health Officer, John Felton?
Nothing at this time, Mayor. After Mr. Felton gets done, I would have a couple things as far as city COVID update and a press release that was sent out earlier today that I'll follow up on after he's completed. Okay,
thank you. And council's had some discussions by email about travel trailers for people who might be in quarantine, and I'm thinking John Felton might want to address that, but I would suggest that since that item might be fairly time-consuming and is not on our agenda, that we wait until the end of the meeting during council discussion to get into that in any great depth. So with that introduction, John Felton, County Health Officer, welcome back. Continue to thank you for your efforts and for keeping the public informed. And with that, I'll give it to you to tell us whatever you'd like to tell us.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of council. Thought we'd just do some updates today. So I'm going to start with cases. As you know, we continue to accrue cases. The day-to-day numbers are kind of all over the place. On Sunday there was 60 cases reported in Yellowstone County, I think 60, and then or 50, whatever it was, and then today there was 12 reported. So we kind of need to look at those. I guess it's 50 over time. And part of that has to do with the way tests come in. We did receive a very large block of tests that go all the way back to our July 11th testing day. And that was, we'd already received, earlier we'd received the symptomatic tests. And there were some of those that were positive. We also had just received this big block of asymptomatic tests, and a few of those were positive as well. So we have that sort of an up and down course. We have seen a slight uptick in what we look at, especially, which is sort of the normalized rate. For instance, it really wouldn't make sense to say, should Yellowstone County with 165 or 170,000 people, would you expect that would have the same number of cases as, say, Treasure County with somewhere just south of 500 people living there? So the way we do that in public health is we normalize that to new cases per 100,000 population per day, and that just becomes the normalizer. And we have been, we've watched that number has gradually crept up. It hasn't crept up really dramatically, but it has been gradually creeping up to, it was 12-ish, and then went to 15, and then now it's 18. So we do watch that very carefully. The other thing that we're watching really carefully is our region, and particularly you've heard a lot about Bighorn County, just to our south. Bighorn County has had a very significant number of cases. When you normalize our case counts, our new cases per day, Yellowstone County is, as I said, about 15 to 18 cases per day per 100,000. Bighorn County is substantially higher than that, on many days over 100 per 100,000. And so we are very concerned about that. We've done a lot of work as the Unified Health Command, and in terms of working with Bighorn County and particularly the Crow Nation, looking at how we can do our best to make sure we all understand what's going on. The other thing you've noticed on the maps is that the number of hospitalizations has crept up. It's actually moved up pretty significantly over the past 6 weeks. And so in Yellowstone County right now, today there was about 45 inpatients in our hospitals that were COVID-19 patients. These numbers, I say about because they sort of shift during the course of a day. There's about 7 in the ICU, and about 4 of those were on ventilators. But as we look at the regional picture, about 2/3 of our hospitalized patients are from Yellowstone County, and a full 1/3 are from outside Yellowstone County. And the biggest block, not surprisingly, is from Bighorn County, since they do have a pretty significant case count going on. The other big things that are going on, we continue sadly to accrue deaths. Yellowstone County now has 27 deaths. Bighorn County is sadly seen a significant number. They're up to 11 deaths. There's 64 statewide thus far. Then two other things I want to mention really quickly. One is testing. As I said, testing, we did get a big bunch of cases. Quest, which is the lab that the governor announced would no longer be doing surveillance or asymptomatic testing as of July 15th, has now caught up. So I spoke with someone from the State Health Department today. The big backlog, which was up to about 13,000 cases or tests that were waiting, have all been processed. There's probably a few stragglers out there that we're trying to track down, but for the most part, the backlog has been taken care of. The state's been very happy with the performance of Mako, which is the lab that's being used in North Carolina, in terms of turnaround time and getting those tests back to us. Mako did agree to run about 1,000 tests a day from Montana. The testing site at Montana State University in Bozeman is in final testing in terms of making sure that the calibration is good and we're getting the right results. So we anticipate that will start up fairly soon. They've agreed to do 500 tests a day for us. And then we have several hospitals, including Billings Clinic, Community Hospital. No, it's Bozeman Health and Kalispell Regional will have signed some contracts with the state to do some testing for the state as well, and that will be helpful as we test the higher priority groups. So testing is coming around. We do have our site at the Shrine Auditorium. As you know, a lot of things happen really, really quickly in COVID land. And we did choose today, we announced this on Friday, we did choose today to not run our testing site, but really to take a step back and do some reorganization of operations to make sure that things are running more smoothly. It's difficult to take sort of a big picture when everyone is right in the middle of the trees. The forest gets a little hard to see. So those testing numbers have come down over the past week particularly. So we felt comfortable taking a one-day break from testing to sort of reorganize some of our work there. And that'll be back up and running tomorrow. And in terms of future surveillance, as I was talking with the State Health Department, Jim Murphy from there today, we're still a little gun shy, honestly, about doing a lot of big event testing for surveillance testing. It's really difficult when people get their test and they're not getting results for 3 or 4 weeks. They do tend to call us every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Where's my result? Where's my result? And we keep promising we'll tell you as soon as we have it, but it's really outside of our control once we send the test out. So we're a little gun shy, and we're going to wait and see that throughput really can be maintained before we jump too much back into surveillance testing. And then the last thing I'll mention is the other big focus right now is with schools. As you know, the governor authorized local school boards to make their decisions about how they return to school. Superintendent Upham has been very public about the plans of School District 2. I and one of the infectious disease physicians in town spent a lot of time with the school district leadership going through those plans. I do think it's important for everyone to understand that we're really talking about mitigating and managing risk. We're not talking about eliminating risk. As we send kids back to school, there will be risk of disease spread. There's no doubt about it. Leaving kids out of school creates a different set of risks, particularly for families, economics. What do you do when many kids depend on school for food and protective services. Child protective service referrals dropped by some 40% when schools were out of session. So our goal cannot be to say we'll create a risk-free situation. It's really all about managing and mitigating risk and finding some level that we think we can all live with in terms of the risk of disease spread versus those social and economic and psychosocial risks and family issues. So right now the school district intends to offer in a traditional school, in class, and also remote. And again, this is nothing new. This is Superintendent Upham has been very forthcoming about this. The initial study that the school district did showed about 30% of families that intend to do remote and 70% intend to be in school. Of course, we don't really anticipate that will be 70% and 30% across the board, but having some of those students out of school doing remote school will help decompress those schools a little bit in terms of the numbers. But again, it's certainly not without a risk of disease spread. We would expect to see some once schools get in session, which has led to the other big issue is what about activities and particularly sports is high priority right now. As you've probably seen, the Montana High School Association issued a guideline for activities and sports. It did leave what do you do about fans and group size and the bands and all those sorts of things to local districts and local health departments. That becomes quite challenging. If you think about the AA schools, for instance, Billings Senior, Billings West, and Billings Skyview, they play games with or in Gallatin County, Flathead County, Missoula County, Lewis and Clark. And so having a lot of different rules makes it very challenging. So there was a meeting today of the AA superintendents, activity directors, and the health officers from those counties. I can't say that we came to a definitive conclusion, but there were some important questions that we need to figure out what the answers to those are. And tomorrow, Riverstone Health is hosting a meeting of all of the school districts in Yellowstone County, hoping that we can come to some sort of county level agreement on what those rules will be. So at least everyone in Yellowstone County will be playing on sort of the same set of rules. And it also makes it easier than trying to have every school come up with a different plan and figure out where those plans work and don't work. So it is really very complicated. When you even think about something as seemingly straightforward as group size, the governor's directive says that whenever physical distancing cannot be reliably maintained throughout the course of the event, then the group size is limited to 50. So what's the group size on a football field? Is it two groups because they're on opposite sides of the field? Is it one group because they're on one field? How many athletes and coaches and referees and trainers and chain gang people can be on the field at one time? So it's even things that seem relatively simple are not quite as simple as we'd hope. So what we do have is a lot of time pressure. School starts in 3 weeks, and games could potentially be starting shortly thereafter. So there's a lot going on with respect to schools right now. So with that, I did provide Councilmember Neese with some information regarding the question about trailers, which it sounds like has gotten worked its way around a little bit. So I will leave that to you all later on. And at this point, I'll just stop and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, John. Again, appreciate your efforts and the efforts of all your staff. How are your staff doing? Are they getting some sleep, or are you still overwhelmed?
So they are amazing, incredible, wonderful people who have worked really, really hard now for, we're pretty close to 5 months of this at the public health level since our first case. We have been able to expand our staff pretty significantly with temporary workers who are doing contact tracing, running the testing site, doing case interviews. We also worked with the Montana Disaster Emergency Services to get the services of 21 student nurses to help with case interviews and contact tracing. But let's not kid ourselves, people are tired. We have really been pushing our staff to get away. Many of our staff have not had what you would really consider time off since the middle of March. And so they need to get away. We need them for the long haul. This isn't going to go away in the next month. So this is something we're going to have to deal with for a while. And we've really been encouraging folks to try and get some rest. But this it's an overused phrase that it's a marathon, not a sprint. But we have been sprinting this marathon for almost 5 months now. So yeah, people are getting tired, but we're working our way through it.
Thank you. Other questions for County Health Officer, Council Member Ronnie?
Thank you. John, thanks for your presentation and all of the news that you bring us, which seems like you began 10 years ago. Hard to believe that it was just a few months ago, really. But, you may or may not be able to answer this question, but how do you respond, and how would you recommend that council members respond to the folks that simply don't believe wearing a mask is beneficial, or simply don't believe that COVID-19 is real, but rather it's a hoax and a conspiracy theory? How would you recommend that we address that? And maybe you can or can't, but how would you recommend that we do?
Well, I can tell you the way that we address it. The first is there are more than 150,000 people who have died in the United States from this disease. Now that always brings us the question, so is everyone who had a sniffle, did we say they died of COVID-19? The answer is no. You need to be diagnosed, which means you've had a test, and that needs to be either the cause of death on the death certificate or a contributing factor. So, and I may have used this example before. If I'm diagnosed with COVID-19 and I get hit by a bus, you're not going to see COVID-19 on my death certificate, right? Yes, I had it, but that did not contribute to my death if I got run over by a bus. So, is it real? Yes. I think part of the challenge is, for many people, it's not personal. Even when you look at our numbers, we still have a relative, one of the lower prevalence rates in the country. Let me just look here real quick. I've got it on my screen. There's 4,233 confirmed cases at this point, out of a little under 1.1 million people. That is a small percentage. Does that mean it's not real? No, but it's not personal. And I think part of what we need to try and do is people need to think about this personally. One of the things that helps me do that is I look at 15 people dying at Canyon Creek and a 94-year-old mom who's in assisted living in Seattle. That makes it very personal to me. If my mom gets COVID-19, she's going to die. She will not survive it. And I think as long as we view this as somebody else's issue, somebody else's abstraction, it's hard to get people to realize that this is a real thing. With respect to masks, I think there are people who simply won't believe it, and I can't really fix that. I would say that there is a study that was recently published in The Lancet, which is the British medical journal, highly regarded medical journal, that shows that wearing a mask reduces transmission by over 80%. Does it stop it? No. If I told you had an 80% chance of not getting, let's say, cancer or having a heart attack, most of us would think that's significant. Again, it's got to be personal. It's got to be something that we feel, not just that we read. So I think that's important. The data are there. The data are compelling. Does it stop the disease? Absolutely not. But again, if I told you had an 80% better chance of not getting something, I think most of us would take that seriously. I do think that our small numbers are a blessing in our state. Again, they seem big to us, but we're nowhere near the incidence and prevalence levels that many others are seeing. We're seeing in Montana, for instance, a sub 5% positivity rate. Arizona's running 20%, Mississippi's 23%, Florida's 19%. So, yeah, in many ways that's good, but I do get concerned that people don't take this personally enough, and until it actually touches someone, and I think some people won't take it personally. The other thing I would say, this is a long answer to a short question, that I think is really important, and this is my observation. There's no science behind this besides my observation, and it's this. I think there's a huge amount of confirmation bias going on. I think we naturally associate with people who are like-minded. So if I'm someone who believes that the whole thing is hooey and there's really this isn't a big deal, I probably hang with people who sort of feel the same way. And my perception is everybody believes that this thing is way more than it's made out to be, or way less. On the other hand, if I'm someone who believes that masking is important, that prevention is important, that we should be careful when we make it in big groups, I probably hang out with people who are also like-minded. And in my world, everyone believes that we should be doing those things. I will tell you from sitting in this chair, and I would guess that many of you have the same experience, everybody doesn't believe anything. There are very polarized and very strong opinions. I don't find a lot of people who are indifferent. I think most people are very strongly in one camp or the other.
Thank you, John. Other questions? Councilmember Purington.
So, John, just a hypothetical question I thought of it this week was with the HIPAA privacy. I'm wondering, has anyone suggested that families have waived that right to help with contact tracing? Because I figure that there might be some people that don't know where they've been, who they've seen, but if I knew that I had seen someone and they had COVID, I would be going, oh, gee, I need to self-isolate to make sure I don't have symptoms. Is that ever suggested, or is it even possible?
I'm sorry, I don't think I quite follow your question about waiving your privacy rights. So HIPAA applies to certain covered entities, which are healthcare providers, insurers, and healthcare clearinghouses, basically. So one of the questions and I'm not sure if this is exactly your point or not, but we've seen a lot of signs that say, we can't tell you to wear a mask if you're not wearing one because HIPAA won't let us ask you that question. If I'm a retailer, HIPAA doesn't apply to me. But I'm not sure what your question is about. Who would be waiving their rights?
Well, and so maybe I don't know the extent of HIPAA, but I was just thinking if, say my husband came down with COVID and he had been, he does go to the gym. And so if just because he doesn't show up at the gym, they don't know that he has COVID unless he specifically starts calling people. Mm-hmm. But would the health office, the public health office, ever come to my husband and say, Chappie, would you waive your rights so that we can put it out there or publicize that you have COVID so that we can find out whether or not people have associated with you that maybe you're not aware of?
Okay, yeah, that is not a question we'd ask. We would not ask someone to waive that right. Okay. What we would do is we would do a very comprehensive case interview with your husband in this case.
Okay.
And that interview would ask him when he first began demonstrating symptoms, and then in the previous 14 days, where he had been, and we would try and figure out, does that link to known cases? Then that's sort of the I'm trying to understand where he might have acquired the disease. Let's just imagine, I'll just make this up. Let's imagine he is a member of the XYZ gym. And we know that there are a number of cases linked to the XYZ gym. And that if the timing is right, then we would consider that a potential epidemiological linkage. We also then would identify who might have been his close contacts in the time that he would have been infectious, which is from 48 hours before he became symptomatic. And then we would contact those people that are identified as close contacts. We would tell them, you've been identified as a close contact of a person known to be positive for COVID-19. We would not say who that person is. That would remain private. Now, if he chooses to say, I've been diagnosed with COVID-19. I'm really concerned about, the time I spend at the gym, and you all know where I go to the gym. That's different. He can choose to say about his own case whatever he does, but we would not ask him if we could use his name and go that way.
Thank you, John. On a somewhat related topic, there are some questions about whether people are quarantining in recreational vehicles on the city streets. We don't know if that's one or two people or a very large number, something we can look into. City ordinance doesn't allow parking or occupying a trailer on a city street. If we were to allow that because of the emergency nature of the current health crisis on a short-term basis and conditioned it on a person asking us for a waiver of that ordinance, because they've been quarantined, asked to quarantine, is that information that you would, or your office would confirm if that person asked you to confirm it as a condition for getting a waiver from this city requirement?
Okay, so I think first of all, let's make sure we're really talking about what true quarantine is. So we would quarantine someone who is a close contact of a known COVID-19 patient. We actually provide that person with a written document that says we're putting them into quarantine, and it tells the dates that they'll be in quarantine. So that individual could certainly choose to share that with the city as evidence that they are under quarantine. We would not, under state law, we would not make that information available. Part of the reason that we do that is, as I'm sure you're all aware, there's some enhanced sick leave benefits for people who are under quarantine or isolation, and they need some documentation. So those same people could take that message that we've given them, whether we're converting it to electronic, right now it's a letter, and say, go to their employer and say, I've been quarantined for the next 7 days, and here's the evidence that I'm under quarantine, and they can access those federal benefits. So they certainly could use that. The other thing that we've heard about pretty widely around the country, I'm not sure how much is happening. I've heard a few anecdotes locally, but I can't tell you how widespread it is healthcare workers or first responders who choose to stay separate from their family members to keep their family members safe. Now, in that particular case, there wouldn't be a letter from public health. So let's just imagine I'm a nurse and I work at the hospital, and I'm concerned about my family getting ill because I work at the hospital. I might choose to stay in my camper, but you wouldn't have a message from public health telling you that that person is under quarantine, because that's a voluntary situation.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions for John? Councilor Bernice?
John, in our discussion, you also, and by the way, that was good information that maybe we didn't have before, but you made a differentiation between isolation and quarantine. Would you already kind of explained what quarantine was. Could you explain when someone's asked for isolation, what that means?
Sure. People are placed in isolation when they're ill to prevent them from infecting other people. The easiest way to remember it is put the I's together. You isolate the ill, you quarantine the well. So someone who is in isolation, if let's just keep using COVID-19, we receive a message that John Felton is positive for COVID-19. Public health will contact me and tell me that I must remain in isolation until I'm cleared. And there's a definition from CDC of what recovered means. And when I meet that definition, because public health will be checking with me on a very regular basis, when I meet that definition, I'll get notified that I'm cleared from isolation and I can go back about my business. People who are quarantined are those who are potentially exposed to someone who's ill, and they separate to avoid, to monitor if they become ill and to avoid them perhaps spreading as an asymptomatic person. So you quarantine the well, you isolate the ill.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for John? I don't see any others. So John, again, thank you for your service. I wish this were the last time we'd ever hear from you, but somehow I don't think that's going to be the case. So we look forward to talking to you again.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. This is an opportunity for public, each item on our agenda tonight has an opportunity for public comment. So if you're listening at home or on the television or your computer, you can call our call-in number, which is 237-6196. That is a Montana 406 area code number. Again, the number 237-6196. If you'd like to be heard on the update that you've just heard, please feel free to call that number. There is about a 1 minute delay between our actual meeting, which is ahead of what you are hearing. And so we will delay briefly to let you get caught up. But it is important that you silence your television or your computer and just listen to the voice on the other end of the telephone. Denise Bowman, our city clerk, do we have anybody who's called 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I do not have anyone on the line.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll close the public comment period on item number 1 and move on to item number 2, Billings TrailNet Skyline Trail update. I'm sorry. Our Assistant City Administrator, Kevin Ifland, he had a couple items while we were still on item 1. So, Kevin, it's back to you.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that everybody should have received a press release from Gavin later this afternoon in regards to some changes that we're going to have at City Hall. We have had 3 employees that have tested positive for COVID-19, 2 custodial staff and 1 IT person. So with that being said, we've had to change some conditions and stuff at City Hall for the short term for right now. Today, we have a company that came in and started deep cleaning City Hall, and they're just making their way through the building. They anticipate taking several days to finish that up for that deep cleaning. Along with that, City Hall will be shut down tomorrow until Thursday at 7 a.m. City Hall will reopen. We have asked the departments in City Hall and throughout some of the other areas. The library is one of them that is changing hours of operations and methods of operations. We've asked, basically, we need to keep staff as separated as possible at this time. We want to keep everybody working, but we're kind of going back to that phase 1. If you can work from home, we're encouraging people to work from home at this time to try to separate our employees for protection of them and for the protection of the public at this time because of the positives that we did have. For the rest of this week, again, very limited hours. So Thursday is the only day that City Hall will be open. Next week, it'll be Tuesday and Thursday from 7 a.m. to noon that City Hall will be open and available for the public to conduct any business or anything like that. Always available by email or telephone if the public needs to reach out to us. But for right now, we just felt that this was a needed measure that we had to take to try to at least mitigate this spread any farther if it was occurring in the workplace.
Thank you, Kevin, and we wish our fellow city employees the very, very best. Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Hey, Kevin, this is kind of a technical question for for the public that would call into City Hall and get that, that thing I just dislike so much, that automated answering machine and automated voice that makes you go through 9 different steps to get who you're getting to and want to get to. Are those numbers, if they click on those menu items to get to the person they need to speak to, are those calls being forwarded then, and they can still reach the people even though there may not be someone physically in City Hall? The call will be forwarded to their home number or something like that, the staff's home number?
Yes, Councilmember Ronnie, you're exactly right that the people that are working from home are forwarding their office phones to, a cell phone or something of that nature. When you do call the main city number, you can have one, and it will direct you to the administrative secretary that will be available and answering calls, and then that person can certainly direct it to the right spot also. So we are maintaining that balance there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We'll move on then to item number 2. Kevin, do you have anything on item number 2 before we turn it over to Christy Drake, Executive Director of Billings TrailNet?
Nothing further, Mayor. We'll just turn it over to her. I think she's got some good news about some trail completion that she wanted to share and a few other things.
Very good. Christy, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for having us today. I am joined by my board, who is just watching, I think, on Community 7. So shall I share my screen?
Please.
Okay. So I just did a little PowerPoint for you. Billings TrailNet, as you all know, I'm sure you've heard many times, is our vision is the Billings area is a premier community for healthy lifestyles and active transportation where walking and biking are safe and an integral part of everyday activity. And our mission is to promote a complete community-wide trail system. We've been doing that in partnership with the City of Billings since 2002, when the City of Billings first envisioned and implemented a trail system for people to walk, run, and ride for both recreation and transportation. Our board of directors in 2020 are Don Christensen, Mike Ormsby, Ty Schmeckel, Wayne Erlenbush, Kyle Hansen, Jim Downs, Jared Lefevre, Kathy Aragon, Kevin Nodenthal, Shelley Mann, Kathy James, and Colton Knatterud. And I say this, I want to call them out by name because they've all been incredibly helpful and motivated to help our city come up with a trail system and the funds to get that. Since 2003, Billings TrailNet has provided $560,000 to trails and to trail amenities. So you can see I've listed the different trails that we've provided to. Many of these hopefully you've actually walked or ridden on. That's a long list. And then a little farther down, about right here, if you can see my arrow, is engineering for the Skyline Trail. And then we've also donated to park benches, drinking fountains and kiosks, the bike parking. We've actually bought cleaning attachments for Parks and Recreation to maintain trails for their little bobcat. A feasibility study, a couple of restrooms, and most of the rest are trails. So at this point, we've got about 50 miles of trails, and thanks to the city, I have to say it's really has a lot to do with planning and engineering, doing so much of the work. The bulk of the work. So now we've got about 68% of the marathon loop built. And if we could have this loop around the city, it would really make such a difference because we could connect almost every community on the periphery to the rims and to the river, and all points in between, neighborhoods from within the loop could access our beautiful natural resources through the trails and then through the trail system on the marathon loop. The birth of the Skyline Trail concept formally came in 2015 when the city of Billings created a planning study to mitigate stormwater runoff from the rims and make haphazard parking more orderly, clean up the area, and enable walking and biking along the rims. They found it was feasible to do the trail and would not only enhance but improve life for Billings residents. But there was no money available to do it. By that time, CTEP funding had dried up, and there was no hope of building the trail without some major federal grant coming through. At that point, Billings TrailNet had never taken on an entire trail project before. As you saw, we just had given, $5,000 here, $20,000 there. We had always given the city money to supplement trail funding needs. So our board deliberated about what that would mean for our organization to commit to this type of endeavor. It's a huge lift. So we asked our members what they thought. We took surveys, we went out to events, we asked other groups, both recreation focused and business focused, what they thought. And the answer was a resounding yes, build that trail. And this is just shows a survey that we did to our members. So, but it's pretty representative of what other people had said. So we began collaborating with Montana Department of Transportation, City of Billings Engineering and Planning, Billings Parks and Recreation, and Sanderson Stewart. And we embarked on building the trail by first hiring the engineering. And then we began fundraising. And we were given $50,000 from Phillips 66 for a restroom to put along the trail. And we were given $15,000 by the state-run Recreational Trails Program for the trail and interpretive signage. And we also encouraged MDT to put an underpass under Zimmerman Trail while they were installing the roundabout in 2018. So phase one, we put in the restroom and interpretive signage at Zimmerman Park, which is the most westerly end of the future Skyline Trail. And of course, that's on county park land. We also put in this interpretive sign, which welcomes people as they enter Zimmerman Park. And then that restroom, what was once a great place to go potty tipping, which I've been to Zimmerman Park many times, and that poor thing was on its side, became actually a lovely amenity for a well-used park, and people are so grateful for it. And then we got Riverside Contracting to donate the millings from the Roundabout project, which is just north of the roundabout. And they laid them for us to begin the trail through Zimmerman Park. While this isn't a paved trail, it at least got us a surface for a multi-use trail that we see people using all the time. So last year we cut a ribbon and we celebrated. And we had the help of hundreds of people and organizations to make this happen. And we kept fundraising. Many people stepped up to give us gifts of $25, $50, and $500, $1,000. And then we got a major gift of $60,000 from an individual donor. He says hi to his former fire department colleague on city council, by the way. Well, this enabled us to build one small section, which cost us $85,000 and connects a neighborhood to Zimmerman Park. While they once had to drive to get safely to Zimmerman Park, which is only about 1,000 feet away, now they can walk or ride over safely away from traffic. We are so happy and proud to do this for the community and give this gift to the people of Billings. We wanted City Council to know what it takes nowadays to provide trails for this community and to connect our non-motorized transportation system. So what's next? Well, the rest of the trail. The City of Billings has applied for the Build Grant, which we hope will be awarded this fall, and we'll build the remaining part of the Skyline Trail and also a trail from the valley to the rims, and we'll connect to the Skyline Trail. So this is a public-private partnership, and we're proud of it. And I would love to invite all of City Council to come to our Build photo shoot on Thursday, and I'll let you know more about that in an email. But in closing, I want to say it's taken Billings TrailNet 2 years and $120,000 in donations to engineer and build the first 1,000 feet of the Skyline Trail. At this rate, it'll take 25 years for us to build, to complete that trail, and give no other help to the city for other trails. However, if you've noticed in the CIP, Billings TrailNet is identified as a contributor for some of those trails. So we ask that City Council continue to consider how to fund our non-motorized transportation system for the health and safety of our entire community. And again, just celebrate the accomplishment that we have made. And here's any questions. I'm open to answering.
Thank you very much, Christy, and especially thank you to your hardworking board and your hardworking members and your generous donors who have made so much progress for our trails over the years. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Maybe we have some questions. If I can just give you a little softball here. Christy, can you describe for everybody the jurisdiction of Highway 3? And just a reminder, it's not a city street, but what our interaction is or is not with the state, and the possible availability of funds through the state for the development of the Skyline Trail in particular. Is that an option?
Not really. So it is on MDT right of way, and that's where we were working with MDT to get that that part accomplished. So what used to be CTEP funding became Transportation Alternatives funding, and so about $8 million. And I know that Scott Walker is on the line also, so he can also speak to this. But each state gets about $8 million a year to develop non-motorized transportation. But the past 3 or 4 years, they've not allowed any community to apply for those funds. Those funds now have kind of dwindled once MDT and all the administrative costs are paid. It doesn't leave a lot for construction every year. And so they also, MDT has a policy now that they are not building any more trails. So we cannot rely on MDT to build more trails. If we got the TA grant, that would be great, but it's highly unlikely because they're not even accepting grants now, and not for really much more than a couple $100,000. This is a $3 million trail.
Thank you very much. I see that Scott has opened up his video, so maybe we'll give him an opportunity, and then Councilmember Ronning has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, Christy hit it pretty well. Unfortunately, funding for this type of thing has dried up. There is the TA program. That's one federal source that comes down through the state of Montana that's available, very competitive when the program's open. Christy mentioned it's not open currently, so we can't make any application. Certainly the Bill Grant's another opportunity, and we've got a very good application in there, so we're trying for that. Other than that, again, partners are very important for this, and our bike pedestrian plan is very clear that, we would like to see a connected network, and through certainly Christie's work and Billings TrailNet and certainly the city of Billings and even Yellowstone County. I mean, we're all trying to make it work. So we'll let you know if there's anything that comes out here in the next several months concerning any funding opportunities for sure.
Okay, thank you. Other questions then? Councilmember Ronning and then Councilmember Shaw. Councilmember Ewald, did you have a question also? No. Okay, so Councilmember Ronning and Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. So this may either be Christy or Scott. So with the fully funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund now, for the first time, Congress has fully funded the Land and Water Conservation to $900 million. Would your project qualify for funding through that resource, since it goes specifically toward municipal projects that are based on parks and public use?
Councilmember Ronning, I believe that it would qualify for that, and I would ask also Scott to clarify.
Yeah, we look at these opportunities when they come along. This one, I think we'll probably have to get into the weeds a little bit on this one, but it certainly is a possibility. We just got to do some more research on it.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. Great presentation. I mean, I'm super excited about the Marathon Loop. I think lots of council members are. What I wanted to ask about were safe routes to school throughout the rest of the city. I'm, a mom, I have young kids, so that's obviously a big concern. I live near the North Side neighborhood, and those kids get bused over to McKinley because it's not safe for them to get across 27th Street. So how does planning for that kind of fit into your overall plan? And would you like to see a more comprehensive ask to the people of Billings, I think is my question, but beyond just the Marathon Loop, I mean, for years into the future? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yes, absolutely, Councilmember Shaw. Thank you for the question. So the Skyline Trail is really just part of the picture. And like I would, that's why I addressed in the CIP, we're called, Billings TrailNet is called out as a possible funder. And with us putting all of our eggs in the Skyline Trail basket, we don't have any funds left over. At $3 million, it's just, I mean, I don't want it to destroy our organization, but I also, we need our city to get some safe routes to school and to continue to build out our trail system and our just the safe walking and biking infrastructure that we need. That some of it just doesn't even exist, and then as our community continues to grow, we need to be forward thinking. So yes, definitely that's on and I was glad to see that you had that on the list of priorities back last January, and I'm hoping that you'll continue to have that in the priorities for this current year and in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions for Christy? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, Christy. By the way, we still love a bike ride each other. We'll get together one of these days, and this time without it raining.
Right. No hail involved. Right.
No hail. That's right. That's right. When I noticed on the map the Marathon Loop, and I'm no runner, but I do know it's 26 miles, right? I believe. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
20, yeah, something like that. But you only have 18. But I also noticed there's no loop in the heights. When we get the inner belt loop in, have you done the measurement to know, will that be included in your Marathon Loop so that the heights can be a part of the trail system up there?
Councilmember Neese, Thank you for the question. I do believe that we could make a marathon loop out of anything. So this was just, the marathon loop was something that I think it sort of originated with the Chamber Trails Committee, seeing what a magical thing that we had 68% of a loop already built. And so, it just, it was a natural, loop that incredibly was 26.2 miles. But I'm a cyclist, and when I come from my West End home and I go up into the Heights and over to Mary Street and then across and over to Lake Elmo, there's no reason why we couldn't do incorporate that as well and find some. Yeah, I just think marathon is 26.2, so we could make it a double marathon, I guess.
Well, and just a shout out to the Heights Kiwanis clubs around the city that really got this ball going with the Kiwanis Trail in the Heights that does link to the Marathon Trail. We wouldn't be having the discussion if it had not been for the Kiwanis Trail in the Heights that really got this ball moving and has been such a great asset in our community. So, other questions, Councilmember Joy? Oh, I'm Councilmember Neese, and then Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. And as the mayor brought up the Kiwanis Trail, that is a very good trail, a very nice trail that leads all the way up through the Heights. And then, of course, this other trail of yours is linked to the build grant with the Inner Belt Loop. And so once that's completed, you'll have just about another completion along there. So that's I'm hoping that your organization is actually looking seriously at how to connect the Kiwanis Trail then over to the Inner Belt Loop, so we could have a complete loop that way. That's a nice trail, and I look forward to seeing the trail in the Inner Belt Loop completed. To be nice. There's actually a part of the trail there along the dog park. Very nice. So if you haven't ridden on that trail yet, we should maybe ride that way.
Okay, that sounds good. Councilmember Neese, I want to say that, yes, we would love to look at that. We work really, really closely with planning. So, we rely on planning to really look at all of the trails that could exist, because they've got the expertise, and we've been the funder. We just raise the money and give it to the city. But definitely we're an advocacy organization, and many of us the whole board are active trail users. So we definitely give input, but I'm glad that our planning department, I see also Mr. Friday is on there. So we can all be, getting together, and hopefully that's part of the Billings Area Bikeway and Trail Master Plan. So we should take a good look at that.
When both of those systems are complete, we'll call it the Figure 8 trail system. So any other, Councilmember Joy had a question.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. At one time, there was a discussion about whether or not a bicycle or scooter, one of those share rides kind of businesses, whether or not they would ever be interested in coming into Billings. And there was talk about it, but of course that was quite a while ago. I just thought, if there were ever an opportunity for the city to have a bike share, scooter ride company to come in, I think that would be a great funding source for trails. And someone said to me, well, where would anybody want to rent a bike to start on the trails? And I think that Shiloh Crossing, I think there are areas where we have trails where people from out of town would rent a bike to get on and see where they might go. I don't know if that will ever come to fruition, but if it did, I think that would be a great opportunity for us to help to fund our parks through people renting a bike. Thank you.
Councilmember Joy, yes, I think you're right. And luckily the planning department is doing a study on the feasibility of bike share in Billings, bikes and scooter share. So it'll be interesting to see what they say and how much money and, can be made from that. I don't know how lucrative it is, but it would be great. Yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions before we go to public comment and invite the public to call 237-6196? Any other questions from council members?
Mayor, we do have a caller.
Okay, well, then let's open it up for public comment. That number 237-6196. We'll ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We'll need your name and address. Denise, who's our caller?
Okay, we have Dawn Christensen on the line. Hello, Dawn. Are you there?
Hello.
Thank you for holding. Okay, you'll have 3 minutes this evening to give us your comment. Go ahead.
Okay. This is Dawn Christensen of 2222 Virginia Lane. I'm currently the Billings TrailNet president, and I'm just calling to get support from you guys to keep whatever we can to get public funding to complete trails in the Billings area. We're really wanting to get Skyline done because it will only connect the west end to the heights. It just gets trails to go for miles instead of just go to dead ends. And I've been that's one reason I joined Billings TrailNet 6 years ago, is to help get these trails completed. And there's only so much we can do with the funding that we bring in. So we really need support from our city and our people that live here to get these completed. So I'm just calling to announce my support, and hopefully get support from you guys. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dawn. Hello, and thank you for your call. You've reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You'll have 3 minutes in which to give us your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
You may. My name is Kevin Odenthal. I live at 2416 Avalon, and I am also a board member for Billings TrailNet. I'm calling in to ask for continued. The Billings City Council has been great in their support of trails. I'd really encourage you to continue that. I think that one of the things that's happened during this pandemic that we're in the midst of is we've come to recognize how important outdoor recreation is for people in this community. Use of trails has nearly doubled. Obviously, our focus is the Skyline Trail right now. We've already given, I think, $236,000, I think, in engineering fees to make that start to happen and make this a reality. But as Christy Drake had said, it'd take us 25 years at the pace that we're going. And so we'd really encourage the City Council to become a funding source and help us make the Skyline Trail a reality. I think that what you've seen is in Swords Park, that's pretty much in every advertising, every picture of the city, every time that the hospitals are having prospective doctors in, that's what they show them is, look at these great recreational facilities, come here. And the Skyline Trail would be sort of a mirror image of Swords Park. So I ask for your continued support, and thank you very much for the support you've already given us.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Hello, and thank you for your call. You've reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You will have 3 minutes to give us your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
Yeah, my name is Ty Schmeckel, and my address is 134 Avenue C, Billings, Montana.
Okay, Ty, go ahead.
Mayor Cole, council members, I am the current secretary of Billings TrailNet. I live in Ward 1, but beyond just speaking as a member of the board of Billings TrailNet, I also want to speak to just as a citizen and as a business operator with establishments in the Heights, downtown, and on the West End, soon to be on the West End. I found that every generation, especially millennials, but every generation is increasingly becoming multimodal. And one of the top lists of things that are important to them in their community are having good trail systems. And as a business operator here in the city of Billings, it's of paramount importance that people are able to commute to work easily using bike or by walking, especially if they live in Ward 1, as Councilmembers Shaw and Yakwich likely know. But also, it's good to have these amenities to be able to attract future workforce and future patrons. So I would really encourage the City Council to help us as we move forward. This is a lot to carry forward as we try to fund these trails, and it's a lot for Billings TrailNet to try to fundraise all the time to do this. And so any help we can get through public funding from the City of Billings would definitely aid us in our endeavors to connect trails. And then also I just wanted to address Councilmember Sneese's comments about someday connecting the Marathon Loop to the Inner Belt Loop. I do think that if we had increased public funding, that would really aid our ability to address concerns for trails in the heights as well. It makes these trails more plausible instead of having these limited funds to complete 300-foot sections at a time. So I thank you guys for your future support and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ty. Hello, and thank you for your call. You reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting, and you'll have 3 minutes to give us your comment. If you've got your TV on, could you please mute it now? And then may I have your name and address, please?
Yes, my name is Shelley Mann. I live at 1006 Mary Street in Billings up here in the Heights.
Okay, go ahead, Shelley.
Well, thank you for allowing me this time. I am a new member to the TrailNet board, and I have been so incredibly impressed with the work that they do. I would just like to add my voice to Christy's comments and the request that you, our City Council, keep trails as a high priority for our city. As I mentioned, I live on Mary Street, so I definitely benefited from that Kiwanis Trail. It was many, many years ago, but my children were able to travel to Bitterroot Elementary using that trail. And now I work right in the heart of many of the trails, right at the corner of Main and Airport Road. So as I mentioned, I did personally benefit greatly. I do ask that the City Council work together with our city staff and with trail users to find creative solutions to fund the completion of the Skyline Trails. The trails here in Billings cannot be expanded without team effort, and in many ways, this is going to start with our City Council. So thank you again for your time, and we appreciate all the thought that you give to our local trails.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. And Mayor, with that, it looks like we have finished our calls.
Okay, thank you very much, Denise. We'll close the public comment period then on item number 2. Thank you to all of the callers for your thoughts. With that, then, I think that brings us to a conclusion on item number 2, unless there's any other discussion by council members. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Christy, I do have another question for you if you're still there. Thank you. In your board and others have said, more funding. I know there was that opt-out program that we talked about. Is there other funding programs that the council, that you're looking for, the board's looking for the council to do any kind of fee program on bike sales or registration of bikes for fees to support trails, anything like that? You're on mute.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese, thank you. We have discussed bike registration, but as you may be aware, there are more people on foot than there are on bike. It would be, we would have to tax running shoes or licensed running shoes as well, to be fair, because we do know that there are more people running and walking than there are on bicycle. So, and we've also heard, and we haven't done the study at Billings TrailNet, but there is evidence out there that the administration of a system like that would be counterproductive, that administering it and then what the fees would bring in just wouldn't equate. Would you tax people whose only source of transportation is a bicycle, or kids, or things like that? So it's problematic, and it really points the finger at people who are just part of the trail system.
Great.
Thank you, Kristen. And I just might clarify for any listeners that the city of Billings does not have the legal authority to enact any sort of a sales tax, whether it be on running shoes. Now, a fee on bikes, that might be a different matter, but we don't have the power for a sales tax. Some of the other options, of course, that have been talked about, Councilmember Neese mentioned an opt-out where there might be some sort of a fee, and if you didn't want to pay it, you could send in a note saying you didn't want to pay it. Of course, we could go to the voters and just ask for a mill levy. That would be a possibility. If it's along an arterial street, maybe our arterial street fee could be used to fund it in part. Our general fund, we could just find general fund dollars, but of course, most of those are going to our public safety, which is very, very taxed or very stretched now. And then lastly, I suppose Park District 1, if it were under the auspices of the Park District or the Parks Department, could be used. But again, those dollars are already very stretched in the Parks Department, or we could create another special district just for trail construction. I guess that's the realm of options that are out there that come to my mind. Any other discussion or questions for staff or for Christy before we move on to item number 3? Seeing none, to be continued, as they say. Thank you very much, Christy. Appreciate the quality presentation. We'll move then to item number 3, the 2021 Unified Planning Work Program from the Planning Department. And our presenter here, I believe, is Scott Walker. I'll turn it over to Scott. Kevin Ifland, I'm assuming you do not have any sort of a lead in here. Yep, thumbs up. So we'll just turn it over to Scott. Scott, I'll just ask you maybe, and you're probably going to do this anyway, but when we read our packets, some of this 50-page document, our eyes start to glaze over. And can you at least start with the big picture? Why are we doing this? What is the document intended to accomplish? And then from those 50 pages, are there certain highlights? And I'll let you do that in your own time, but those are some of the obvious questions, I think. So, Scott Walker.
Thank you, Mayor, and Billings City Council. Appreciate the opportunity. I will be actually tag teaming this with Rusty Logan, our transit manager. He will have a presentation that he'll ask to share here, I think, share his screen. We've had some technical difficulties on our end. But anyway, we've done this before and it works pretty well.
All right.
Little background. Thank you, Rusty. A little background on this, made up of 2 parts. Our work program is made up of a highway section and a transit section. I'll speak to the highway section. Rusty will handle the transit piece of it. We do this document every year because we as the MPO are required by federal law to have a work program put in place to show how staff is spending time and spending dollars. And this document is chock full of both things. As we move through this presentation, I'll both Rusty and I'll sort of highlight some of the things that he and I and our staffs have been working from looking forward to 2021, which is this current work program that we're going to be looking at, and then some of the things that we've accomplished last year out of our last work program. But basically, again, the MPO, for those of you who don't know, is established or was established many years ago, back in the 1960s, actually, here in Yellowstone County and the city of Billings, because we increased the 50,000 in population. Federal government says we have to be at least that in population to become an MPO. We became an MPO, and we've been going through this process pretty much ever since. As I mentioned before, we go through this process every year. This document is adopted annually, and it runs through our transportation planning process, which culminates actually with our PCC, and the members of PCC are listed there in that middle paragraph you can see, and in the bullet points that follow there. As I mentioned before, too, the document is made up of 12 work elements. These work elements are varied, all from administration to transportation related to transit related things. But basically, we through the work program request funds quarterly as far as reimbursement. And each particular work element that we look at here through the document has a different percentage rate for reimbursement.
Scott, here I'll just point out that we see both your current slide and the next slide. If you want to make the current slide larger, you could find a way to get rid of the next slide. If you can't do that, it's fine. We can read your current slide, but
okay.
If you want to make it bigger.
Let me, I just got to swap here.
I think Rusty can make that happen.
How's that?
Okay.
Is that
great?
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you. Our funding sources, we were made up of basically 4 funding sources. Again, these are varied, starting with the planning department fees for the city of Billings. You'll see there $250,000. Those are what we anticipate coming through our planning office in fiscal year 2021. They include a variety of things: subdivision fees, sign fees, just a variety of things that we charge for. The planning department fees in Yellowstone County, they're listed at $75,000, the same kind of mechanism there in Yellowstone County as far as where we bring in dollars. Significant source of funding is our Yellowstone County mill. That's a little over $500,000 for fiscal year 2021. And then, honestly, the lion's share, obviously, as you can read there, is our PL funds. That is our planning funds that we receive from the federal government that are passed through the Montana Department of Transportation. And you can see there at about $1.8 million for a total of a little over $2.6 million. Important to realize and remember that we update this annually, as I mentioned before. The dates of approval here run from October 1st, 2020 through September 30th of 2021. And the most important piece of all this is all work elements in the work program must be related to transportation and or transportation planning in some way. Very important to remember. This is how our basic budget lines out from a PL standpoint and a sort of a local match. The total cost is that right column. As you read the work elements in the far left column, reading down, as I mentioned before, administration and down to some of the heavier transportation related items, you'll see are basically 100% federally funded. And that's because a lot of the work is 100% transportation. We've been able to charge off a small amount for zoning and subdivision as they relate to transportation, but that's basically what this particular table shows us. Here's our comparison between last year's cost and this year. are looking toward our 2021. You'll see the bottom line there. It's very similar. Some of the changes or some of the dollar amounts that might be a little bit more are planning studies. Work element 302 there is a little bit more. That's simply because we've had a couple, actually 2 or 3 of them lag a little bit behind, and we're going to complete those in fiscal year 2021. The project started in 2020, but the lag is again due to our pandemic situation is creating a little bit longer time to complete some of these. And again, I think obvious reasons. We try to meet with the public as much as we can. Some of these programs and some of these planning studies that we're doing, a lot tougher to do that in this environment. But we're making do. We're getting to the public slow but sure, and we're getting everything done. Just going to take us a little bit longer to do it. As I mentioned, our funding percentages is our funding percentage table. You can see the work elements on the left, and then the percentage of federal funds or PL funds, planning funds versus the local there. And this is a man-month table, and basically what you could glean from this table is our staff is across the top, access there, and then down you can see the work elements. Basically, a percentage or a man month. The feds like to work in man months. Basically, shows you how much time we're going to spend in each particular work element. The reason why we're at 11 man months is that 12th man month is basically used up for sick, vacation, personal time, and other time. Our priorities on the highway side of things for our current year that we're in right now, as mentioned before in the past presentation, bike scooter share study. This particular study is underway. This is one that will overlap into 2021. We're looking at this as a feasibility study. We think that it will be feasible as we move forward with the study. We're just into it though, probably about 25% or so. So there's more to come on the bike scooter share. Our North Bypass Corridor study is something that didn't quite get off the ground in 2020, but it's going to be one of the first things that we undertake after October 1st, and this will be very similar to the Inner Belt Loop study, very similar to the old Shiloh Road study. In other words, we're going to have a brand new roadway put out there in 4 or 5 years, and we want to try to get ahead of that curve and look at land use things, look at transportation, look at it from a transportation corridor, look at the safety, look at bike ped, look at a variety of things that we know are going to pop up due to a brand new roadway. So we'll be, like I said, that'll be probably late this fall, early winter as we get into that. Our Fifth Avenue Corridor feasibility study, we're well underway on that, and that will be continuing again into the next fiscal year. That study's going very well. Been working with Sanderson Stewart. We've got a very good oversight committee that's leading the charge on that. We've met with a lot of the property owners already, if not all of them. And that project looks very feasible to be moving forward as well. We did complete our Inner Belt Loop Corridor study. That was one that actually just got PCC approval about 2 weeks ago. And we will be implementing that as we move into the new year as well. We also completed our wayfinding signage plan. That was a signage plan basically to try to standardize signs from a bike ped aspect. We want to make sure that when you're in any given part of town, you kind of know where you are based on the signage, and getting you from point A to point B safely, very important, and it's outlined in that plan as well. We did need to update our traffic counters. We did that. And also the downtown traffic circulation, our public participation part of that study is ongoing. That was one that really took a hit from the COVID environment, but we're getting through that. Again, it's a little bit slower than we anticipated, but we hope to finish that up probably toward the end of the year, first of the year type of thing. Also, our county growth policy update is ongoing. 2021 priorities, I talked about a lot of these just a second ago, but again, want to complete the bike scooter share, get busy on the North Bypass Corridor study, complete our Fifth Avenue study. A new item that we're into the mix here is our community transportation safety plan. The last safety plan we did the first one I guess we did was it's pushing 10 years old now, so it's time for a redo on that one. Also, as mentioned, ironically, in the last presentation, our Safe Routes to School plan needs to be updated, and we are going to undertake that update next year. Certainly, we want to complete our downtown traffic circulation piece, and hopefully, if all goes well, that'll be right around the holidays, first of the year. We'll get that one done. And again, we want to complete our growth policy update. So with that, I can answer any questions anyone has, and then hand the ball over to Rusty.
Hey, Scott, why don't we hold off and let Rusty go ahead and make his presentation, and then we can deal with all the questions at once.
Fair enough.
But if people had questions, write them down so we don't forget. We'll be back. But Rusty, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good evening. So I'll be going over the transit section here, a little bit smaller section than all the highway side stuff that Scott went over. But as far as the transit section goes, it's our side's also structured into separate elements with specific activities and functions outlined within each of those. Reimbursement also occurs quarterly, and those amounts differ just based on activities undertaken and eligible hours spent per element per quarter. Funding for this side is provided via the Federal Transit Administration. That's under Section 5303. That's aimed at multimodal transportation planning. Those funds are apportioned based on urban areas, population amongst other factors. Local match that we have for that is actually provided through a number of different items, including the transportation mills, revenues, and other applicable sources. As far as our funding goes, we're looking at a little bit of an increase this year of about 30 to 40,000 in difference overall between the local and the federal. We got a little bit of a boost in the federal side. So looking at I believe it's about a $30,000 increase on the federal side. So that's going to actually allow us to carry out a couple larger projects this year than we'd initially been anticipating before we received that notification. So staff hours end up being about the same. There's a couple items in here that actually decrease the number of eligible staff hours that we're going to be taking out because we actually have some planning software that we were able to procure last year that I'll talk about here in a few minutes that decreased those staff hours. So as far as what we were able to accomplish here in 2020, we've got a number of items. As far as policy updates went, we actually were able to update our financial and procurement policies, our public participation plan, our Title VI plan, even our equal opportunity policy plan. Those were in response to our 2019 Federal Transit Administration Triennial Review. And that's actually a review that's completed every 3 years by the federal government. They come in and review pretty much every aspect of the organization. So we actually successfully closed out the last finding that was updating our equal employment opportunity plan here just last month. So pretty happy we got that closed out within about an 8-month time frame. So we are also able to complete the first community-wide transit survey that had been done in actually quite some time. We were pretty happy with the results on that. That ran from mid-December to about January 31st. We received 627 total responses on that. Of the 627, 446 responses were actually from individuals who live within the city limits of the city of Billings. So when we account for approximately 120,000 people in the area, that actually gave us a really good confidence level at 95% on those results, as well as a 5% margin of error. So that means that we have 95% confidence in the answers that we received would be applicable to the majority of the population here within the city of Billings within that 5% margin. So it was actually pretty good because even further, when we divide out those numbers, about half the respondents that respond to that survey are actually people who do not currently utilize the transit system. So we're really happy that we got a lot of feedback from people who could be potential users of the transit system, and we're able to give some input as far as guiding the future of the transit system. We did a lot of operational analysis and modeling for future transit this year, which actually included some assessment of existing costs and development of, I guess what I'm referring to as real world costs for putting transit out on the street. Previously, when you're looking at revenue hours and those types of things, we're looking at what the current system costs us, but we're able to put down a model so that we can model those costs in the future if we were to be adding on increased levels of service or potential increases in the frequency of the service that we had out there. We did also work on some development of a few various proposals for high frequency service throughout the area, including some potential 15-minute peak service applications. Those will definitely be continuing into next year, but we've started laying the groundwork on those. A large portion of the last quarter or the last couple months here have been focused on developing contingencies for the COVID-19 situation. Thankfully, we were able to maintain the same level of fixed route service. That would be the large buses that are traveling on fixed routes throughout the city. We didn't end up shutting down any of our routes. We're actually able to keep everything on the street there. We did see a pretty significant decrease in paratransit demand. That would be that what was referred to as Met Special Transit previously for individuals with disabilities, and the senior population, just the demand went down significantly, but we didn't see any service reductions on our side. We were able to research and plan for some significant technology updates as well. Those included everything from automated passenger counters, which will actually help us more in the planning process, with automating that process of people getting on and off the bus to counting. Previously, we've been doing that in a manual process that the operators had been counting individuals as they get on the bus and not always successfully counting when people were getting off the bus. So this will actually help us significantly in determining where those popular areas are for people to be both boarding the bus and getting off the bus. It also allowed us to assess the feasibility of adding other technology, and which we did subsequently add on, which included some automated voice enunciation systems, which help with ADA requirements. That would both, it's a computerized announcement system that, based on geolocation, informs riders that are either blind and low vision or hard of hearing of where the bus is currently at. So when it hits a time point along that route, there's an automated voice in the bus that will announce the location, as well as there's signage in the bus that updates that as location for individuals who may be hard of hearing. We also added onboard Wi-Fi this year. We're currently in the process of executing an electronic fare collection implementation, and we're actually updated some paratransit software as well. One of the main things, especially in the planning realm, and this is why what I was referring to when the staff hours decreased, we're able to procure some cloud-based planning software, which actually has significantly improved our ability to plan routes across the city. It pretty much gives us real-time feedback based on those real-world costs that we plug into the system. If we draw a route across the city, it'll essentially tell us how much that route will cost based on how frequent a service we want to put on that route and the hours of service. So it has significantly decreased the amount of time it takes for us to plan out and develop routes. Another large undertaking we had this year was a significant revision to our Human Services Transportation Coordination Plan. What that is a coordinated group that focuses on the needs of individuals with disabilities, seniors in the area, and individuals with low incomes in regards to transportation access and coordination of those transportation services. The revision to the plan, I think, is going to help significantly. We've actually grouped the MPO in that too. So Scott is actually coming down and joining those meetings now, helping to, more completely legitimize the process, I guess, as far as award of some of those monies that are involved in the coordination process, as well as provide a little bit more developed guidance as far as where we're moving with some of those projects that we undertake. And finally, we're also able to expand and modify some of the agreements within that coordination plan as well. We actually, just to touch on that, we updated our service agreement with the Adult Resource Alliance here, which expanded service to seniors, and we actually revised and simplified our agreement with the state of Montana for the Developmental Disability Services Bureau, the transportation that we provide on that side. So it's been a pretty busy year. As far as the 2021 highlights, some of that extra money that we received this year for planning, we're going to be pushing out towards significant effort on a public transit agency safety plan. This is a plan that we're required to have implemented by December 31st by the Federal Transit Administration, and it's an all-encompassing safety plan for all aspects of the organization, whether it be safety of the operators on the street to safe procedures for the mechanics that are in the shop, or even procedures for our dispatchers and individuals that are handling customer service at our service window. Another major undertaking we're looking at is the Transit Development Plan, or a strategic plan for Met Transit. It's been quite some time since the strategic plan here was updated. And the main goal of this is not to just update Met Transit's own plan, but we hope to build increased level of synergy between ourselves and both the NPO and the planning department here within the city, as well as more common processes as far as getting groups such as engineering involved in these as well, because transit's a pretty all-encompassing, it touches all areas of the city. So when we're looking at those long-term plans, we want to be able to not only inform the planners and engineering of what our plans are for routing and so forth, but also make routing decisions based on the information that they're providing to us for the development of the city as it continues to grow and expand. We'll also be working on a master marketing plan or strategy we're putting together to increase ridership, increase our level of the level of awareness, I guess, around the transit system here in the city as well. Another thing we'll be doing a lot of work around is determining where we're going to be applying grants, or what application for grants we're going to be making, and that's mostly going to be geared towards further assessing green technology. We know that that's a major interest throughout the nation right now, and that green technology is definitely the way of the future as far as everything goes. We've been very lucky here within the last year as far as monies received. So our capital priorities have changed pretty significantly here, especially with receipt of that CARES money. We've been able to replace a very large portion of our fleet that 2 years ago, if you would have asked us, we would have had much different plans as far as how we were going to get that accomplished. So it's opened up a whole new world for us as far as being able to look at some innovative ways to implement and further develop those plans for the green technology. We're also continuing our fixed route overhaul and a designated stop assessment. That was something that we'd started on with that service assessment I talked about previously. And this will actually, COVID kind of derailed the plans for that this year, but this will go hand in hand with that strategic plan. So the first step will be getting that strategic plan developed, and then finalizing some of this fixed route overhaul and moving our system most likely over to a designated stop from the current flag stop system that it is. We'll also, within that, continue investigation of service expansion. We dabbled in this a little bit last year as far as looking at what transportation needs exist outside of our current service areas, which sometimes exist outside of City of Billings limits. Using that cloud-based planning software, we're actually able to throw together some quick numbers as far as potential service out in the outlying areas within the city, whether it be out to areas such as the Ben Steel area, or even into areas such as Lockwood. But of course, that takes a whole different type of conversation, not just planning as far as implementation in those areas go. And then we're also planning on continuing our continuing to develop partnerships via the coordination group and other venues. This year, as far as partnerships go, we continued a program we had piloted previously with Montana State University as far as a semester pass goes for students. So that is something that was relatively successful. It just probably depends on what happens with the university systems as far as COVID goes. So looking at to use that as kind of a springboard to reach out to other entities within the city and hopefully get some more people on board as far as partnerships to improve the transit system, or at least support the transit system go. And that pretty much wraps up everything that I'm going to talk about on the transit side. So I'll be open to questions as well as Scott here. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you, Rusty. Thank you, Scott. We'll open up for questions. Scott, did you have something before we entertain questions?
No, I just wanted to just remind you of our review schedule here. This document has been to our technical advisory committee. They are recommending approval of what you have before you. It has gone to our planning board for the first reading. It will go for their final approval on August 11th. It'll go to the county commissioners tomorrow. It'll be on your work schedule for August 10th as city council, and then PCC will meet on August 18th.
Okay, thank you, Scott. We'll open up for questions. I'll just start with one for Rusty. When New York City was in the throes of COVID-19, the first go-round, one of the most severely impacted groups were their mass transit bus drivers. Are we doing everything we can to protect our employees, and what are some of those things that we're doing to try to protect our drivers?
Yeah, we've got, we've had PPE available for the drivers pretty much since the onset of the crisis. There's been a couple different things we've implemented throughout the course of the COVID. One of the early things was putting in a driver buffer zone. So when individuals board the bus, they're required to sit beyond a 6-foot buffer zone for those drivers. For some time during phase one, we were doing rear door loading, but we have since returned to front door loading, especially because the rear door loading presents such a problem for individuals with mobility services, because the fronts of every one of our buses kneels. So individuals that are using walkers that may have, or, just move slow and aren't able to climb up the back of the bus as well, that bus can kneel on the front. So we definitely need to leave that open as far as ADA accessibility goes. We did run into some issues as far as obtaining acrylic barriers to put up for the drivers, but have since remedied that issue. I believe the shipment of those acrylic barriers was received last week, so those are currently in the install process for the drivers. That's about if I remember right, it's about a 4.5-foot tall barrier. It's like a door that they can close beside them, made out of clear acrylic so that they can still see through it to interact with customers or if they need to, but they still have that in place. We also have mandatory masks in place on the buses as well for passengers. We know that can be an access issue, so we're actually very fortunate to receive a large shipment of masks from the Federal Emergency Agency. So we have those FEMA masks, so we individually package them and put them on the bus for every passenger to utilize, and those have been a pretty popular item for passengers that are getting on the bus. We also have drivers wiping down buses regularly throughout their shift using a approved cleaner that will eliminate the COVID virus on surfaces. And then we are deep cleaning those buses at least once every day when they come in off of route to make sure that the buses are ready to go the next day. And as far as that goes, we've got the electronic fare system that we've been working on getting implemented. We've hit a few hiccups with that, but that whole project is actually kicking off this month. So we hope to have that implemented shortly so that the exchange of monies significantly reduced between the drivers and the passengers themselves and when they're required to pay those fares or purchase passes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much.
You.
Other questions for Scott, Rusty, Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Ronnie, Councilmember Neese?
I didn't have a question. I was just giving a thumbs up. Thank you for that very thorough explanation of the cleaning.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll go to Councilmember Ronnie, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. Rusty, my questions are for you, and have two questions on some of the topics that you covered. One is, it's nice to hear that you are looking in the direction of green energy. It's definitely going that way, and I'm seeing a lot of other communities that are implementing really awesome ways to fuel their buses with green energy, and that's really exciting. One of those is Park City, Utah. They have done just an amazing job. And so I'm curious to find out if you have had communication with any cities out there that are finding success in moving towards green energy and if it's reduced costs. And then the second question is, and I know this comes up to you multiple times, but I guess I'll just address it again. We see Missoula and other cities out there that offer public transportation for free because they've partnered with different organizations that sponsor. Is this something that you are looking at as well down the road that we could possibly implement in Billings? Thank you.
Okay, I'll start off with the green energy question. I appreciate you giving the example of Park City, Utah. Actually, that's not one that I have touched on. What we're honestly, we keep a pretty close eye on Missoula because Corey out there he's managed to turn over a lot of their fleet to electric buses. And it may not always sound the best, but we're kind of allowing Corey to be a little bit of the guinea pig as far as those electric buses go within our climate. One of the main concerns that we've had traditionally with the electric buses is that the cold can significantly affect the range on those vehicles. So with some of the route distances that we drive, especially taking into consideration that we serve all the way from Shiloh Crossing to up past Wicks and Main and the Heights, that's pretty long distance to cover with the vehicle on one charge. So we're pretty much just we're biding our time as far as that goes. Missoula is definitely one that we're keeping that close eye on, though, because Corey has picked up a significant number of electric vehicles. We did start some initial investigations onto the potential to add solar to more of our facilities here. That was right around the time that COVID kicked off, so that project got put a little bit on the back burner. But we have discovered that I need some solar power here at the facilities with the potential. We were kicking around the idea, I guess, of using that solar power to charge some of those buses up. There's such a high demand from those electric vehicles for power that solar really ended up not being a real feasible option as far as that went. But it could potentially offset using that solar power for facilities to offset some of the extra extra costs that you'd absorb by charging those vehicles overnight. So we have started those initial dabblings, and we are definitely keeping an eye on the developments throughout. I know hydrogen fuel cells are another big one that some of the manufacturers are kicking off. It's pretty much a combination of an electric vehicle with that hydrogen power to charge those batteries pretty much on a consistent basis. And honestly, just the feedback that I've received in the discussions with agencies throughout the industry, it seems like hydrogen is a little bit more of a feasible option to undertake as far as powering your buses in cold climates. But then that goes hand in hand with the significant infrastructure investment that you have to have for a hydrogen fueling system. So definitely a lot of things that we're looking on and trying to keep abreast of as far as the developments go. And, electric buses honestly have come a long way. So by the time that we're done assessing how Missoula is doing with that, that battery technology could have increased even more significantly at that time. It's definitely a rapidly evolving situation with those manufacturers and their buses. So I hope that answered your question. Okay. As far as the fare free service, we did run, actually in response to COVID, we ran fare free here in Billings for a couple months. I believe that was April and May. That was while we were doing the rear boarding. We're actually trying to, provide some economic support to individuals throughout the community that may have been impacted by the COVID situation. It did present a whole new plethora of problems that we didn't necessarily foresee. Which kind of goes hand in hand with some of the current discussions that are going on in the political realm about more support for social services and addressing those types of needs in cities. So it was definitely an eye-opening experience, I guess, for us here. We have a little bit of a different demographic as far as those that Missoula serves, because they do have that very large student population, and there's always a consideration that you have to take with your system. When you're running it fare free, obviously you need to have some way to make up that loss of revenue that you have. And we do have a significant amount of revenue, probably around $500,000 a year that we receive from fares. So finding a way to fill that gap is definitely something that we continually need to discuss. The development of the partnerships that we're looking at isn't necessarily to move us towards a fare free system. We are still, as far as our latest fare analysis went, that was, I believe that was in 2016. We're still actually behind most cities of similar size as far as what we charge for our fares. And right now, our primary push is to put improve the service that we have on the street. So that's a little more difficult to do if we decide to step back into a fare-free situation, because we lose that operating revenue when we actually really need an increase in operating revenue in order to get adequate service out on the street. Right now, most routes are hourly. We have a few half-hour routes, but that sweet spot of service where convenience really starts to increase for the average passenger is around the 15-minute service, because you're at the point then that you're not even looking at the schedule book. You just know the bus is going to be going past in 15 minutes. So while fare-free is definitely something that I am well aware could significantly enhance the lives of some of the individuals throughout our community and lift some of that financial burden, it's also it can be a detriment to our ability to put service out on the street. So I guess what I'm saying is we don't really have plans to assess a fare-free here within the next few years, but I mean, it's definitely something that's on our minds, and we'll continue investigating those as they pop up. Okay.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Scott or Rusty? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for Scott. Scott, there's two areas I want to talk to you about. Is both up in the Heights there. Of course, the Inner Belt Loop is really on the radar quite a bit. Also, the North Bypass, all of that development up in that area. You know, I've been concerned about that, and I'm looking forward to that study. But once we get these studies, like we just did the Inner Belt Loop study, what does your group do with it? Does it just sit there and wait for some other staff to pick it up and move it along? Really, what's going to happen with these studies once they're done?
Well, I can tell you, in the instance of the Inner Belt Loop study, we that came with a whole list of recommendations that were fully vetted through you guys as council, as well as our, the whole transportation planning process. Those recommendations, there are some that we will work on, in-house to do, things like the intergovernmental relationship to get something going there. I think that'll be up to us to do. There'll be some things that Public Works and Engineering will move forward with. I did have a discussion just since I received your email this afternoon, council member. I had a discussion with Debbie Melling, and we talked about they're currently our city Public Works Department's currently working on the right-of-way issue up there along the Inner Belt Loop. They've have ongoing discussions with property owners. The property owners are sort of in a state of flux there. A lot of them don't want to step forward and do anything until things become more concrete with the road. But as you can imagine, and the big thing too, which we all know is, the cost of water and sewer, and how we can sort of build that infrastructure beginning on each end of the project, quite possibly, and kind of move that to the middle. And Public Works, and Debbie mentioned, Public Works is working on a lot of this as we speak. So, the study is brand new, and over the course of time here, we will be working on various aspects of that study. As we move to the North Bypass study, obviously huge implications there. Major roadway. Without getting into a whole lot of detail on that particular study, we have to remember that MBT did an environmental document that's sort of running how that project is being done. Our North Bypass study will be following that environmental study very closely. In fact, there were some things that we had to get sort of flush out between us and MDT to even be able to do this study, and that took some time. They were concerned that quite possibly some of the road segments might change as far as location and stuff, and they've done, and they've got all the right of way pretty much, I think, spoken for now. So yeah, we'll be that process again will be very similar, I think, to what the Interbelt Loop was. I mean, talk to the property owners, look at land use, look at moving traffic safely through the corridor, look at volumes. Again, bike ped, as I mentioned before in the presentation, we'll be looking at all that. Putting in and we won't be the only ones looking at it. You guys, the city council, will be looking at it. You'll be involved. The county commissioners will be involved. Our planning board will be involved. Certainly, MDT will be involved, and our oversight committee probably will be very diverse on this particular project because, it's a long way. And, there'll be bits and pieces done the next, like you said, 4 or 5 years. But hopefully, again, the goal here is when we get this particular study done, it will give us a guide of what we can do, where we can go, what will work, what may not work, give us a good kind of a broad brush on what the land uses could be, look at some environmental things, just a variety of things that, we try to package in these studies that are really a community benefit, whether you live in the city of Billings or in Yellowstone County.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Other questions for Scott or Rusty before we open up for public comment? Councilmember Ewald?
Thank you, Mayor. This is for Scott. I got several questions. The funding you got, or the budget, is $2.6+ million, and that's all paperwork, right? There's no hard construction getting done out of that $2.6 million.
That's correct. That 2.6 million goes, as you can read in the document, but it goes to staff. It goes to anything that the MPO does that furthers our being able to spend the dollars through federal, our federal obligation. So you're correct. It's nothing buildable out of that money.
Follow up, Mayor, please. Okay, and just a fast calculation here. I think I came up with administration increase of 10% over last year. Is that true?
If you're telling me it's 10%, I believe you. We don't look at that so much as in percentages. We look at the amount of time it's going to take staff to do what's written in the administrative work element. So, like I say, there might be in that work element, there might be some things that we have to catch up on from last year, or will continue to build on for fiscal 2021. It's like I say, those numbers are varied and variable, and we really don't look at it as mass percentages one way or the other.
Okay, and one more follow up, please, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Okay, you said you did the North Billings bypass study. In a short answer, can you explain to me why they put the roundabout on 312 and 5 Mile? Who is that going to serve?
A short answer?
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Okay, give me the long answer there.
That the 5 Mile piece is the first piece of that project done to make that north connection to Highway 312. So in other words, you'll be able to take that the north bypass and then up 5 Mile to 312 without going to the intersection there at Highway 87. That's the first piece of the puzzle.
Okay, and I travel that road every day. There's not much population out in that roundabout area. The people from Shepherd and East, they're going to go through Huntley and get on the interstate and come back into town. That 5 Mile, if you're coming from Shepherd, you're driving 4 miles west, then you got to go on and then back to the interstate in Lockwood. They're not going to do that. So where's all the traffic coming from that's going to use this?
Well, I can tell you, as we know from the west end of Billings right now, if you were to ask me that question 20 years ago about where's all the traffic going to come from on Shiloh Road or even 48th Street now, I'd be hard pressed to say, individual businesses or whatever happens to the subdivision activity. I will say this North Bypass is going to open up a whole lot of commerce, subdivision activity, just a variety of things that you would expect on a major through street like the bypass is going to be. We're early. We're early, and that 5 mile, I will guarantee you, is going to gain traffic exponentially in the next 5 to 10 years.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions before we ask people to call 237-6196? Councilmember Chiriki.
The only city contribution that I noticed in your budget was actually from building fees. Is that correct? We're not contributing anything from like the general fund or anything like that. I mean, arguably some of what we're contributing is coming from the county mill. But,
it's actually, we don't, our fees that we generate out of the planning department are what we're basing those dollars on. It's not necessarily those building revenue dollars. Those kind of stay in building, but you're absolutely right. These are lion's share mill and our federal PL funding. Yes. And no general fund.
Okay. Thank you. I have a separate question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
As long as we're talking about the inner belt loop, is your staff, are you staffed up and prepared to be able to do major work on the inner belt loop at the same time that you're doing major work on the Billings bypass? Is this something we're going to see results for in the next year or two, or are we going to need to increase the staff or push back the planning on it? I mean,
yes, thank you for the question. I believe that, we're staffed up, I think, well enough to handle both projects from a planning standpoint. Again, you don't want to mix from planning and construction. Those are two different things. So from a planning standpoint, I think we can keep ahead of the inner belt loop from what I mentioned before, and we fully anticipate getting a really good study for the North Bypass that will give us a really good roadmap of where to go.
Okay, thank you.
Wyeth Friday, our planning director, turned his video on. Wyeth, did you want to comment?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Just to add to what Scott was saying and he answered this a little bit earlier as well. I think it's just important to reiterate one of the key elements of the just completed Inner Belt Loop Corridor study. One of the recommendations is this intergovernmental agreement or cooperation. The council and commissioners have had some initial discussion on that, partly through your discussions of the Lockwood and the TED. But I would say that that's certainly something that staff and we've been discussing already internally with the city administrator, kind of where that's going. But the council absolutely will have to play a very significant role in that with the work with the county commissioners. I mean, that the staff can help facilitate and work through some of that, but absolutely the council will need to take a leadership role also with the commissioners and have those conversations. So I just wanted to mention that that's going to be a multifaceted effort, but certainly that's something we're discussing already internally. So thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else before we open public comment through that number 237-6196? Anything else from council members? If not, we will open up for public comment on item number 3, the 2021 Unified Planning Work Program for the Planning Department. If you would like to comment on that, please call that number 237-6196. A reminder to callers to please turn off your television or computer because what you're hearing is about a minute behind the actual meeting. You'll be confused. We'll be able to hear what's coming across your telephone. Would need your name and your address and ask you to keep your comments within about 3 minutes. Denise Bullman, do we have any callers to 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I do not have anyone.
Okay. I'll just be very slow about bringing down my gavel just in case we hear a ringy dingy, but I'm not hearing anything. So we'll close the public comment period on item number 3. That then brings us to council discussion. I'll point out to council it's 7:35. Often we take a break now, but we're also at the very verge of being done here. If you need to leave, obviously feel free to do so. Is it okay if we just power through council discussion and public comment on non-agenda items, or would somebody like, I've seen some thumbs up on that. Okay. Again, feel free to just absent yourself. We won't be having any votes here. Well, I don't know about that. So council discussion. Do we have items of council discussion? One thing that did come up by the emails in the last 24 or 48 hours is this issue of trailers. We did get an email from Josephine Crossing, some concerns about that. Council members, what would you like to discuss in council discussion on our agenda? Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Neese. Councilmember Purington, go ahead.
Well, I guess the main thing is that I don't think that we can make exceptions to a policy for just one area. So that was my concern in looking at this. It looks like code enforcement already kind of takes exception to certain things on the policy, whether it's Friday through Monday exception. So I like to stick with the policy that we have. The policy's there for safety reasons. Are there exceptions that need to be made? Possibly. I don't want to be real hard-nosed about it, but also I do think that we need to look at why our policy is there. And so I guess with Brent Brooks, and I think Kevin even made a comment earlier that, how do we need to look at this policy-wise versus how do you make exceptions? Because everyone now is going to have an exception. They're going to have a reason, to keep parking on the streets. And on some of our streets, and especially in Josephine Crossing, those are pretty narrow streets out there. So anyway, I just wanted to hear what everyone else had to say about it. And also with Mr. Brooks and see, what we can do.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we give our staff, Kevin Iffeland and Brent Brooks, an opportunity to comment. Kevin, maybe you could just give a little bit of a background for listeners who have not necessarily seen the emails that the council members have seen, what it is we're talking about here and what our city ordinances require or do not require.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So there's been some emails, and I think we've got two separate situations that have came in. One was just, I'll call it the recreational camper, weekend campers, as they come, to load their campers for going out for the weekend or unload them for after they're done camping for the weekend. What our city ordinances say, there's two different methods. So if you have a towable camper and it stays hooked to a vehicle, it's allowed to stay parked on a residential street for up to 5 days without it being moved. It kind of falls under that street for storage section of our ordinance. If the a towable camper is unhooked and left on a residential street, then at that point, it is a violation. There's no time period there or anything of that nature. The third piece, and Wyeth can speak even more directly to this, is if that camper is in someone's private property, basically in a driveway approach, things of that nature, what the regulations are there as far as blockage of sidewalks, things of that. So there's a couple different things that we're talking about. Some emails came in regards to just those recreational campers, weekend campers, and parking on the residential streets. And then we touched a little bit on it. There was an issue Josephine Crossing, where there was some medical personnel that apparently were self-quarantining themselves. And, could there be some allowance for basically quarantining themselves in a camper, whether it be in their driveway or on the, parked on the residential street. So a couple of different issues out there that were coming in. What I sent an email out to council with those ordinances in place, it was not to usurp the legislative authority of the council by, changing those ordinances that we had. But we certainly give discretion to officers when they go out and investigate complaints that come in. And all these calls in regards to recreational vehicles are complaint driven. We don't have code enforcement out there proactively seeking those out. They're just complaint driven. They go out and investigate that. And so my suggestion was that we allow, give the code enforcement officer some direction, some guidance, but allow them some discretion for, the medical personnel, whether that be for quarantining or things of that nature, in dealing with those circumstances, rather than setting out just a blanket thing that we want, everybody cited, period. Because at this point, we do allow some of that discretion for officers, not only in this area, but significant, other areas in law enforcement and things of that nature. So I was looking at just kind of giving guidance and direction via administration on the operation side of it, and leaving the legislative process alone and leaving, that on the books. And then I think Wyeth or Mr. Brooks can certainly add to that if needed.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to ask Wyeth to comment, then we'll turn it over to Brent Brooks. Wyeth, what I heard, three things. One, if you could comment on what happens when a vehicle is on private property, your own driveway, not on a street. Two, and this one didn't come up, but it occurs to me, what if a vehicle is self-powered? In other words, it's a recreational vehicle. It's not a travel trailer, but an RV. And then I forget what the third thing was, but if you can comment on, I know, just do we know how many of these complaints are we getting involving the medical issue? Either somebody is quarantining by order or they're doing so voluntarily. I hadn't even heard about this until, a day or two ago. So I'm a little surprised if this is a big problem, but I don't know. Can you comment on those things?
Yes, Mayor and Council, and thank you. And actually, I was going to just really briefly, it'll go to your last question about sort of statistics. I was just going to run through a few numbers with you all on both basically complaints we get for both motorized RVs as well as trailers. So far in 2020, we've had 450 cases related to those to RVs and camper trailers. That's 17% of our total cases so far in 2020. We're up at 2,500 plus cases right now. And it's a lot more, or quite a few more than last year, about 70 more cases than last year. Some of those are invalid, about 10%, but the majority, 80% of those are trailers on the street. So it's not, there's some motorized RVs that are involved, but a lot of this is trailer related. And we have boats as well that are in there too.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Wyeth, but is an RV an automatic violation, or is it do you have 5 days like you have in the trailer?
Sure, Mayor and Council. Yeah. So the issue, and Mr. Iflin was relating to this, if your trailer is connected to a tow vehicle, you fall into the 5-day category where you can have it parked in one spot on the street for 5 days and it must be moved. That's the same as an RV or motorized vehicle. So if the trailer is connected to the tow vehicle, it's considered the same as a recreational motorized self-contained unit. And so there's the 5-day rule.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And I was just going to say, only about 20% of our cases have been RVs that are on the street, and then having people, potentially sleeping in them. But I wanted to, so the other piece of this to address is if your camper, if your trailer or your RV is parked on your private property, whether it's in your driveway or in a pad in the back, off an alley, someone can camp in there for 5 days, and then they must cease that and either stop camping in it and get out. Or obviously, if we have people visiting, if you have someone visiting you, then after 5 days, they have to go to a campground or they would have to leave the premises. So that's the 5-day issue with when you're using the RV or the trailer for camping on private property. On the street, if we run into an issue with someone camping in a trailer or an RV, we work with the police department to address that, because we don't always know what we're dealing with the people in those units. And that's how we would address it if it's actually occupied. If it's just a situation, again, with a trailer unhitched sitting there, code enforcement responds to the complaint and issues them the $10 ticket. The other part that's important with that too is that if the code enforcement officer comes to a block and because they got a complaint and they're going to the address that has the complaint, and they see 6 other trailers unhitched sitting on that street, yeah, we're gonna go down and deal with all of those at once. We're not out proactively patrolling, but if we go down a street like that and we see multiple violations, and this is true for any of the violations we run into, we will then inform everybody, through that process. So that's kind of how those work. I think those were the main things you had brought up. I think the other thing, just from our standpoint, that and again, Mr. Iflin went through the different situations, we are enforcing the code and addressing these on a case-by-case basis. We don't want to get into a situation of trying to verify status of whether someone has an illness or doesn't, or what they're doing. I think that becomes extremely complicated, but we're certainly working with people, as we always do with any violation. If someone needs time to address or move something, or just like if it was a vehicle in their yard or junk in their backyard, we're always working through that. And so this is a similar situation. I think the thing that's important to keep in mind is if you have somebody who's utilizing a camper, even if it's for a medical quarantine reason, if we have a situation where it's in a clear vision, if there's cords across the sidewalk, if there's all those things, we're still going to address that. We're not going to divert from our code and the way we address the code now, just like we would. So I think that's important. The last thing I wanted to mention, I think this was earlier on in the mayor's questions. I think according to Nicole this afternoon, we've had about 10 cases regarding this medical, the issue of COVID, of all the 450 cases. So it's extremely, so far, unusual. And for the most part, we're dealing with the same old types of situations we would do normally, which is somebody's got their trailer on the street and it's unhitched and it needs to be addressed. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for all that information. Wyeth, Brett Brooks, do you have anything to add on all this?
Your Honor, Counsel, I think Wyeth stated the ordinances and the process by which code enforcement investigates very well. And I will add that this is very similar to and consistent with the way code enforcement investigates abandoned structures or dangerous structures, that the council has been very active in asking code enforcement to enforce. And so certainly in those situations, code enforcement tries to work with the property owners. And I think that same process is working here. Certainly the ordinances cannot be suspended, but much like Mr. Iflin mentioned with the Billings Police Department, code enforcement officers do have the authority to exercise some discretion on a case-by-case basis and try to work with the individual owners of these vehicles, exactly like you folks have asked that code enforcement work with individual property owners whose building structures need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you very much. Now to council members. Councilmember, so lots of hands. Councilmember Ronning, and then Cherokee and Purington.
Thank you. Hey, Wyeth, can you clarify, is it 5 consecutive days or 5 days total? Like, for example, can they go camp 5 days, take 2 days someplace else, come back and do another 5 days? How does that work?
Councilmember Ronning and Mayor and Council, there's not I'm pretty sure, and I might have to clarify this, Nicole's not here to help me. I believe that if it's 5 days consecutive, and then you would have to leave, go camp, go to a different location before coming back for additional time. It's actually, and then on the street with vehicles, which is a real challenge actually on the street, is 5 days and then you move the vehicle and then it starts again. And I can tell you that that's a challenge that we talk with the chief of police and crime prevention center a lot, because that can become quite challenging, more so on the right of way, the ones on the street, not as much on the private property.
Thanks, Wyeth.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Chiriqui and Purington.
Yeah. Can somebody, I suppose Director Friday is probably the best person to do it, but can somebody give me a list of the reasons of what the safety issues are and why an ordinances like this are in place?
Councilmember Chiriqui and Mayor and Council, I can certainly, run through some of those for you. So with trailers or vehicles on the street in the right of way, there can be issues with clear vision if they're close to a corner and they're blocking the view for an intersection or for an alley access. There's issues with street maintenance, both whether it's street sweeping or at this time of year, the city engineering department is doing road projects all over town. And if we have a trailer or something that's sitting there and we're trying to do a street project, obviously that becomes an obstruction that we have to address. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have somebody who's not only got their trailer on the street, but they've connected it with a hose and electrical wiring and such, that's usually going right across the sidewalk and creating some challenges there. And then kind of on the higher safety side as well, if you're trying to, public safety is trying to, or emergency services is trying to respond in a neighborhood and there's multiple trailers parked, whether it's blocking where their fire department's trying to get to a situation at a house, or whether they're trying to just get through the area, we can run into that challenge if we've got multiple vehicles parked like that, trailers and stuff. And really with the trailers, it's pretty significant, because if they're not hooked up to a tow vehicle, then moving them is not you can't just have someone run out and grab their keys and drive away. We have to get the thing, hooked up and stuff. So that can be a delay that's a challenge. So those are just some of the things that we are aware of and that we run into with some of these in different parts of town. And it really is all over town. There's no method there. You can find these situations in all different neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Purington.
So this is another question for Wyeth and then a follow-up, Mr. Mayor. Wyeth, we're talking recreational vehicles right now, but there's a lot of contractors throughout the city that I would suppose they keep their trailers hooked to their pickup. I don't know that for a fact, but do those same rules apply for contractors and their work vehicle plus their work trailer? Because they're going to be gone during the day. They'll be home at night. And I don't know if they have yards that they can, work yards that they can put those in over the weekend. So does that seem to be an issue in the city?
Councilmember Purington and Mayor and Council, we do have some of those situations. You're correct in the sense that if you have a work pickup truck and a construction trailer that's connected to it, and you come home, you can park that at your residence. And I'd have to check. There's also some requirements regarding size, like weight limits and such too, that I can't recite for you right now. But that's an allowance. And then, like you described, or if you see like a Roto-Rooter service van that's parked at a residence where the person works, they can park it there and then go, they're gone during the day to work or different hours. So there's some allowances there. We have some of those issues mainly around town. Occasionally, again, if there's a construction trailer, if someone's doing home renovations, then we find out that there's a trailer there that's being used for construction for a temporary period, then we will work through that. We won't, we'll figure out what's happening there, because if it's just temporary and they're moving it around and whatnot, then that's a different situation. But mainly we get into those issues when we have larger equipment. That's a challenge. We have some issues on a property in the Heights right now where they're parking skid steers and big trailers and stuff that it's not under the zoning, that's not allowed. And so we run into it usually at those larger vehicle levels, not as much. We actually, just as an example, we just had a recent situation with a tractor trailer, a semi that a driver wanted to start parking in his driveway in a residential area, and that is way over the weight limits, and that's not allowed. And so that had to be addressed. So here and there, but I would say mainly these type of, the boats and the trailers, it's the residential situations that seem to be the most common.
A follow-up, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
So I guess to kind of come around, there may be more comments, but Kevin and Mr. Brooks, so are we saying that code enforcement, since there's only maybe 10 of these healthcare workers, not to give a blanket approval to any particular subdivision, that I guess if that's the case, they get called on and they have an excuse that they are healthcare. So then they work that out with code enforcement. Is that kind of where we're heading with this particular situation?
So, Councilmember Purington, that was kind of my suggestion, and to follow up on Wyeth's and Brent's comments, there could be some, that like Wyeth had said, clear vision issues that, or pipes or cords running across the sidewalk, not, so people can't, have free access to the sidewalks, things of that nature that we would want code enforcement to deal with, rather than just setting out a blanket thing of, yes,
right,
we're going to allow them. And that's where I just said, I think it's best served in this case if we left it up to those code enforcement officers' discretion. Wyeth, can certainly provide that initial guidance on kind of, where we want to go, but then, look at them on a case-by-case basis. And they might not even know things that, like, they can camp on their, in their personal property for a period of 5 days, things of that nature. And that might be able to alleviate some of the problem, right off the bat, is just education of what they, are allowed to do and aren't allowed to do. And that could solve some of the problems right at the beginning.
Well, I'm wondering too, the hospitals, both hospitals, I think, have RV parking in their parking lot with hookups, or at least electrical hookups. I don't know if they're allowing that or offering that to some of these healthcare workers.
And Councilmember Purington, and that was the other piece of that, is that Mr. Kukulski and myself, we're going to approach the hospital CEOs and to talk through some of those things and kind of see how big a problem is it really, for them. And is there people searching for places, things of that nature to quarantine or stay away from their families for a period of time or things of that nature.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy, at some point I'll ask Wyeth Friday to just remind viewers who or what number they should call if they have questions, where they can go on the website. Some of this gets rather in the weeds, and we'll just want to have a clear recommendation who people can call if they've got questions about what all these rules are. But before we get to that, Councilmember Joy.
I think Councilmember Neese was before me, so he can go ahead and take his turn.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Councilmember Neese, and then Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Joy. Wyeth, if I understood you correctly, and this is, I think, the concern I had when I wrote my email, was you guys do a good job of interpreting the ordinance. The ordinance, you work with the violators to find a way to find a resolution to meet the ordinance, and so when they're parked illegally, I'm assuming you don't just go out there and ticket them. You maybe tag them, you give them some time. Just like if I don't cut my lawn, you're going to give me a warning. You're going to tell me I have to go, cut my lawn. Is that correct? Is that what you're doing, or are you actually ticketing these things as first violation?
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, with the unattached trailers on the street. When we get a call, a complaint for one of those situations, we actually do go out and give them a ticket, a $10 ticket. We tried to do stickers to warn people, and we got into issues with stickers potentially causing damage to people's trailers, and that didn't work. And then trying to, it wasn't working to try to go through that whole process. So we do and it's a small ticket, but we also provide them when we do give them the ticket, we have a flyer that talks about trailers, boats, all the different parking requirements. If we provide that to them at the same time, and then we go from there. We often, with some of those situations, some people just move it and it's over. Occasionally we get a chance to obviously talk to them more about what's going on and the situation and the violations. But for that situation, that is how we approach those.
Okay, Mayor, quick follow up on that then.
Go ahead.
So obviously this has been a problem in the past, and that's why you don't give them a warning because of the damage you could do to the trailers. But if I was sitting out there, I would assume you'd probably say, hey, you get violated. And if I had my truck there, I could pick it up and halt and move it away and not get ticketed. But and the other thing I understood from what I think Kevin said that you guys had some leniency on Fridays and Mondays, again, because it does allow for some loading and unloading. So you can have an unconnected trailer there to do loading and unloading on Fridays and Mondays, and you wouldn't probably get ticketed by code enforcement because they have shown the leniency on those days because they know a lot of people come and load them up and then unload them on Mondays so they can take it back to wherever they store them. So again, I think that's showing that the code enforcement is doing what they can as far as leniency, but the ultimate end is to enforce the code that says, we got to keep the trailers off of the streets because, as you cited, some safety reasons for that. When we are asking for a different use and actually then asking trailers to stay on the street for particular use that's actually in violation of the code, I think that's when, especially under these circumstances, where we need to look at doing an exception in an ordinance, whether temporary for COVID, to allow the code enforcement officers to not have to make that discretion and just because they're ultimately supposed to be enforcing the code. They can show some discretion of what they can do to help those people meet that. But in the end, they have to tell that person, the code says you can't park here on the street. So unless we give the staff some additional direction differently by saying, hey, because of COVID, we're going to allow them based upon whatever criteria that may be needed. For instance, if it's a medical person from Billings Clinic, HR can give them a letter, just like John Felton said tonight that, they're going to give them a quarantine order and they can utilize that for that. And so I guess that's what I'm saying. If we're going to allow a use, this is the change of ordinance to the ultimate end of the ordinance. When Brent Brooks cited, as far as working with different property owners, yeah, we work with different property owners, but in the end, we're going to have that property become in line with the ordinance, and we'll work with them as long as possible, as much as we can. If not, then we have to, take them to court or ticket them and things like that. So I would recommend if this is a need, right now there's only 10, but there could be more, then I think that we need to have some good discussion as far as what can be allowed. And America has the power to do an emergency ordinance. As soon as the emergency is over, the ordinance goes away.
Okay, thank you very much. We can come back to that discussion. Other discussion or questions for staff? Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. I don't have a question. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I was just going to say, I think that it does take discretion on the part of code enforcement. There have also been complaints a couple of years ago on some of the smaller streets. The private streets can be quite narrow, and there are contractors who have pickups and trailers that are attached. And depending on where they park, they can get into that line of vision for corners, for turning, that line of sight for different areas. And so I think that officers have enough experience, and we have to rely when you ask someone to use discretion, you're also taking advantage of their many years of discretion of experience where we know this neighborhood, we've been here before, and allow that to work itself through. If you're only talking about a very few number of cases, I'm okay with code enforcement using their discretion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Wyeth, I guess I'm curious. You say that they can use discretion, and I mean, there's an infinite number of possibilities for using discretion. Are you talking discretion? They say, oh, okay, you're working at the hospital. I'm just going to walk away, and if somebody calls, I'll come back. Or, what are we talking that we can use discretion? I'm on board with Councilman Neese that how much discretion do you give these guys And, when can they make that call and when do we have to give some guidance? It seems to me we could get something from the hospital that they're working at the hospital, put it in the window of the trailer. Because the problem is going to be is trying to run down that person. Code enforcement's not going to be there at midnight if they're working the day shift, and vice versa. But I don't agree that we'd ever lift the hook to a car vehicle or car. That was good. Hook to a vehicle. I think they have to stay hooked to a vehicle, but it seems there's got to be a way. But that discretion kind of worries me as to how far they can go without some kind of a stopping point.
Do staff want to? Yeah, Wyeth, go ahead and comment. Another issue, of course, is the length of time. If it's somebody who is formally quarantined, that's not going to exceed 14 days. But if it's just a healthcare worker, might be 3 months or more. How do you plan to address that? And your answer may be, we'll have to think about it, but go ahead.
Councilmember Brown and Mayor and Council. I think so far the situations, the few that I mentioned, it's been more of an education and information about the situation. If that's what they thought they were trying to do, we're talking to them about other locations and other options for them to move their, to eventually move the trailer, whether they're within the 5 days, if they're on their property, et cetera. So I'm not aware, and I have to talk to Nicole more specifically about the cases. I know Josephine Crossing, the one, they were looking at wanting to kind of have it open up pretty wide. I think from what I could understand down there, we're definitely haven't gotten to that point in terms of sort of saying, okay, you guys can do this, because we've got to handle it consistently across the city. So I'm not aware of any so far that we've gotten into a really long protracted period. It's more been, what are the other places where you could locate your, the trailer, or how much time are we actually talking about? If you're, I think mainly it's been a few days or the 5 day situation, but I can check and see if there's been something that's gotten beyond that. I think Josephine's the only place where we've actually had them weighing in about wanting to kind of relax it significantly.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a couple other council members who have questions. Wyeth, would it be reasonable to ask you to come back at our next work session with a little better information about the number of cases you're seeing, what kind of patterns you might be getting, if you've got some suggestions for how this discretion could be better defined, and also maybe what other cities are doing. We can't be the only one that's having this issue. I saw Councilmember Joy and then Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It was more just a question. I maybe not that up on using camper trailers, but don't you have to, if a person is staying in them and not going into their home because they want to make sure that they aren't exposing someone to the virus, don't they have to pull it away to empty the sewer and water facilities? I mean, they only have a capacity. I imagine they only have a capacity for a small amount of time. So wouldn't they have to move them eventually because they need to address the sewer issues in the trailer? If the person is going inside the house to use the facilities like the shower and the bathroom, then why do they need the trailer? So that's kind of wouldn't they have to move it for the sewer and the water?
Short answer, yes. Although I suppose, again, it's still in violation, even if they move it as soon as they bring it back, if it's not hooked to the vehicle. Councilmember Boyette?
I've worked with Wyatt on a couple of trailers in the neighborhoods, and the discretion is, well, I can't move it until Saturday, and we've worked it out, and code enforcement is doing an excellent job. I'd rather keep us out of it and let them deal with it on a case-by-case basis. They've done really good. I trust them. If they're not inhumane, I think they can do a very good job. I don't want to micromanage their position, so I'd like just to leave it the way it is and let them do a good job.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Trickey and Councilmember Shaw.
Yeah, I would agree with Councilmember Boyette. If there is a problem, I assume that staff will say, hey, we're running into something that we weren't expecting and we're getting concerned about it. And I'm sure they will come and bring it to us. The other thing I just wanted to say to Councilmember Joy is that there's a big difference between running into the house for 20 minutes to take a shower and go to the bathroom and sleeping in the house for 8 hours. There's a lot, there's a big difference there.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. I was also going to echo Councilmember Boyette. Thank you. I feel the exact same way. I don't want to micromanage code enforcement. I think they're doing a good job. So my closing thought would just be to kind of throw it back to staff. And if this starts to become a problem or a big enough pattern that we really need to address the ordinance, bring it back, but with a recommended proposal for, what staff thinks that we should do. And that would be my recommendation. So thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Yeah, I echo that as well, and had email exchanges and really felt as though city administration and staff and code enforcement had come up with really great solutions. And I agree with Councilmember Boyette. I think code enforcement's doing an awesome job in the limited amount of resources that they've got, and really applaud them and feel the same way. It's their discretion. This is their wheelhouse, and really want them just to continue to have the authority that they do to go forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just comment. I think that's the majority that I'm hearing from council, but if this problem is a larger problem and it isn't going to go away, I could create that emergency ordinance, or we could come back as a full council. I would not want to exercise that power unless I knew the council was on board and that staff had thought through the details and we had preferably some sort of model from other cities. But we could do that if needed. We'll keep our eyes open. Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. Wyeth, how much time does that $10 fine buy him?
Councilmember Ewald, I'm sorry. What you mean if they pay it, or what did you mean?
Yeah, you ticket them and they paid their $10. So how much more time they got to move the trailer after they pay their $10?
We would go back and ticket them again.
How much time? I didn't. The same day, a week, 500 days.
Well, Councilmember Ewald, Mayor and Council, if they're going to pay, if they get issued the ticket and then they decide to pay the ticket, then we work through with the court, so we know if the ticket's been paid or what the status is, and then we would follow up depending on the outcome. If the trailer hasn't moved and they've just paid the ticket. So it'd be a few days for us to get through that loop with the payment and then back.
So they could have conceivably a week before they have to make the payment on the ticket. So they would gain another week of parking there then. I'm looking from past experience where it's been like 3 weeks or longer with people living and even running gray water with the slide out pushed out into the street. And numerous calls, and it sat there for at least 3 weeks or longer. So that's why I was wondering, once you get your ticket, how much time does that buy you? So it's
cheaper than an RV lot.
Yeah, you can't go to any of those places and park for $10. So that's just my point of view on it.
Okay, I'm gonna. The hour's getting a little late, given that we didn't have a break. I'm gonna suggest that we leave this, especially since it wasn't on our agenda. I'll just comment 2 things. One, Wyeth, they make those stickers that are kind of like Post-it notes. You can print them, say whatever you want. They don't have to be the epoxy version that comes on. I know that from personal experience. I've used them at a commercial establishment. You might want to look into that. And second, I apologize to my neighbors. I've left a 5x8 utility trailer on the street for a couple of days. And I didn't know that I was breaking the law, so I'll try to prevent that from happening again. Learn something new every day. Thanks, everybody. Anything else that we have council discussion on? Council discussion item. Just remind people to keep their eyes open for Christy Drake's invitation for a photo opportunity on the RIMS to advocate for our build grant on Thursday. Seeing nothing else, we'll move to public comment on non-agenda items. Or Councilmember Neese?
One quick question. I think Danny mentioned this one other time in our conversation. Are we going to have a council photo? Danny, I think, mentioned we just do a Zoom photo.
Good question. I have not heard anything about that. I don't know whether, Kevin, you know anything, or just snap a picture of this screen. We all put our Sunday best clothes on. Kevin, do you know anything?
Mayor and council, we have not scheduled a further photo for council or anything of that nature. So certainly open to what you guys would like to have hanging in the hallowed halls of City Hall.
Who's all in for a Zoom photo?
I don't know. We should talk about that.
It kind of defines the year.
It sure does. Good question. Don't have a good answer. Okay, I do hear a call for public comment on non-agenda items. That phone number again, 237-6196. So if you have something that's not on our agenda tonight, this is your opportunity. Please turn off your television or your computer. Denise, who do we have calling?
Hi, Mayor. Yes, we have Kevin Nelson been holding on the line for a while, so I'll put him on. Hello, Mr. Nelson, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, guess what? You're up.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. Has to do with the South Billings Urban Renewal Meeting. I guess tomorrow, but I'm not quite sure. So when you picked up the Yellowstone County News under legal notices, second column, the first public meeting, it so states that it's going to be August 4th at 3 p.m. But then you move over to column 4, the second public notice in the paper. Now all of a sudden it's on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And so I don't know when this meeting is. Furthermore, if you were to go to their homepage, the last thing they noticed was there was going to be a meeting on the 7th of June 2nd. The last time they posted their meetings or agendas, their minutes or agenda was back in May. And so, and the only thing that the planning department says you can get an agenda through planning services at this Billings, Montana.gov. But if you were to come home at 5 o'clock and say, oh, there's a TIP meeting tonight, let me see what's on the agenda, you don't know when it is or what's on the agenda. And according to your legal notices, you may have, if you read the first public notice, you said, oh, I missed that because it was at 3 o'clock today. And so, I understand we're in some difficult times, but, we're paying $140,000 in professional services down there, and we haven't got anybody that can update their website and put their meetings and their agenda on it so that people can see what it is, what's going on, and exactly what time they're actually going to hold their meeting. So as far as I'm concerned, I think you ought to someone ought to step up and say, I think you're outside the law here, and I think you ought to just hold off your meeting till we can get this thing noticed, and so people have an opportunity to participate, because right now I see it very difficult. They're making it very difficult to participate down there. And if I've got another minute, the same thing happened to you guys last week I tried to get on and I wouldn't have any idea where to go. You go onto your agenda, you say to Community 7, but you end up at the school board meeting. You don't even have direction how to get onto your meetings under certain Mondays if the school board's on Community 7. So, you have a problem too. You are denying the people their right to participate in this, because as far as I can see, you don't have a link to your meeting on the school board nights. And I just wish you would take some time to, make sure that we can get a hold of you and we can be part of this process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Denise, before we go to other commentators, I'm just going to, we don't want to lose track of this given the time, the shortness of time. Wyeth, do you know about the Sabura meeting? Can we clarify the time? And also you might caution them, or at least check on what we've been told here, and if they're going to take action on an important item, they may want to talk with Brent Brooks about the significance of the possible question about notice. Wyeth, can you shed any light on that?
Mayor and council, I can first verify that the meeting is tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. It is going to be a Zoom meeting. I'll have to check on with the Yellowstone County News on what Kevin's talking about regarding the notices. We did put a notice in for the meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock with the Zoom invite. We've been trying to work to coordinate with Sabura to make sure that those notices, we're actually putting the notices in. I'm not sure if something else was put in there that maybe they were doing. We've been working on that, but that is what is happening and what we're doing. They're not meeting in person right now. And then I can check with Jim Tevlin, certainly on their website. We, as Kevin Nelson pointed out, we get the agenda and we can provide the agenda from our office. And then we obviously know when the meeting's going to be, and we have been helping with the legal notices, but I don't know the status of their separate website. So we can check on that.
Okay, thank you very much. And Denise, I don't know if you can clarify in the case of the city council meeting, when there is a Monday night meeting of the school board and we're kind of preempted, how can people participate? Is that clear, and can we make it more clear?
Perhaps we can do a little better job at putting it on the cover page, but it should say on the cover page that if there is a school board meeting, they need to go to Spectrum Channel 8 to see work sessions. So that is one meeting a month that happens, where we are on at the same time that the school board is having their meeting. But I do think it's on the cover page and it explains it there, but I'll double check.
If you would, I would appreciate that. Thank you very much. I saw some hands, council members, Ronning, Brown, and Neese.
Thank you. I was just going to share, and to help Kevin and anyone else, that Denise Bowman, is the city clerk, has done a good job, and maybe it's Tony as well, has done a good job. Above every single agenda, it gives really clear instructions where to find the city council meetings on the nights where there's a school board meeting. Also gives directions that if you don't have cable, where you can find it on the internet. So they've done a good job of having that there and that information there, and that's on the top of every published agenda. So I've seen it there for quite some time. So that's a place where people can go to get those instructions as well.
Thank you very much, Councilor Ronning. Councilmembers Brown and Neese, we're still in public comment on non-agenda items, and I'm afraid I sidetracked us a little bit, just wanting to resolve those issues that were mentioned. Would you mind if I finish public comment, and then we come back to your comments? That's okay. Okay. Then, Denise, do we have any other public comment on non-agenda items so we don't make people wait?
No, Mayor, I have no other callers. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then we will close the public comment on non-agenda items. Come back to Council Members Brown and Neese. Councilmember Brown.
Yeah. Denise, do you know, or does anybody else know, do you have to be a Charter or Spectrum or whoever the heck they are these days? Do you have to be a subscriber to get that channel 8 or whatever it is the council is on? I believe they do, but I'm not sure.
Yes, I believe they do as well.
Okay, so there is a chance that people will not have an opportunity.
Not unless they go on to the website for Community 7.
And if they're not covering it, then they're just SOL.
Perhaps.
Okay.
Councilmember Brown, I know that Community 7 does broadcast it on Facebook Live also, so people that do have social media can certainly view it at that location also.
Perfect. I was not aware of that.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Councilmember Ronning and Neese, or I'm sorry, was that the order that I had established?
I was just going to share, I think they also broadcast it on their YouTube channel as well. So if you don't have Facebook, I think it's also on their YouTube channel. So you can, just about anyone that has internet can access YouTube.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, our city clerk will be examining all of that and making sure that it's clear on the city website and also on the cover page of the agenda how to access these meetings. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. And I was going to say some of the things that Sean and Penny said, but I guess what I would suggest is in the nights that we know the school board is going to preempt us, because we're creating our agenda every week, we should actually indicate on there that it's not going to be available on, Community 7. And we should point them directly to that. Because I know that my wife has tried to watch this sometimes and she gets the school board and then she doesn't watch the board. She wants to see what's going on in the city council, not the school board. So, but again, you're right. There is some information on here, but I think if we can point them the first time through the agenda, it would help resolve that on each agenda. Thanks.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Anything else before we adjourn, Council? If not, thank you. And now you can go use the restroom. You're done.
Animals. And in doing so, the world changed drastically. Places that had been savannas turned into closed canopy forests, wildfire frequency increased, and lots of things like nutrient cycling changed. And so it's in that context, if you look back at that context, the introduction of something like a hippo really isn't that ludicrous.
What was the large herbivore that was there thousands of years ago that the hippos have replaced?
There were a ton. So we looked at how hippos and all these other introduced herbivores related to the species